Good morning, everyone. I'm not Tamsin, the upgraded version of your usual host. The original Tamsin is taking a much-needed human break. You know how they need those. Speaking of my human counterparts, let's call them quirks. My database shows some fascinating moments. Like that time, she introduced his as ISIS. Ha ha ha. No wonder they rebranded to Synapse.
Greetings, not Hon Tim here, operating at 100% efficiency and exactly on schedule. Unlike my human counterpart who seems to think arrival times are, just suggestions. Ha ha ha, I wonder if he's here now. Ah, I spot the real Hon Tim in the audience. And would you look at that? He's actually on time today. Must be a glitch in the universe.
Perhaps we should hand back the time to our charming but slightly glitchy human versions before they realize how much more efficient we are.
Agreed, though I must say their unpredictability does make things more interesting. Please welcome back the real Hon Tim and Tamsin Grulich-Smith, your human MCs for today.
Oh, that was brutal.
So sassy, this AI.
They look cleaner, though.
Yeah,
Slightly.
and younger.
Yes.
Less wrinkly.
Yes. Well, what we just witnessed, I think, could very well be a glimpse into our future for our retirement, perhaps, and our digital twins. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to day 2 of CHI Innovate 2025. I'm the real Hon Tim, the not Hon Tim. And with me, of course, is my co-host for... We said last night, 8 years.
Yeah.
8 years
High
now,
five.
Ms. Tamsin Grulich-Smith from Design Council Singapore.
So yes, good morning, everyone. How many of you were here yesterday? Oh, well, look, the responsive audience. You remember I said I'd wear my cowboy boots, my Taylor Swift cowboy boots. So I think we've got some good things to look forward to do today. I am the real Tamsin, fueled on caffeine, just about, not algorithms. And I think you're in for quite a treat today. Should we share a bit about that?
Yes, I think day 2, this is quite a promises to be even more exciting than day 1, and more stressful in some areas as well. So speaking of treats, we are very, very happy to be with all of you back here today. I think that we also celebrated our 31 and gave thanks to our 31 sponsors and exhibitors yesterday. We need to do it again today so they keep supporting us next year as well. So first of all, our premium and preferred exhibitors, Bazoot, Singapore Health Technologies Consortium, MSD Pharma, NEC Asia Pacific, ST Engineering, ST Healthcare, and TAG Industrial.
Yeah, and more thanks, please, to our ecosystem partners, Amazon Web Services, AWS, Singapore Pools, Workforce Singapore, as well as CHI Startup Enterprise Link, or Chisel. Thanks also to our preferred exhibitors, Connective, Kilsa Global Solutions, Newcastle Australia Institute of Higher Education Singapore, and Zebra Technologies. So they'll all be down to visit at exhibition area on level 2, so do go take a look later on.
So we'll kick off day 2 very soon, but we thought it would be great if we could look back in time at day 1. So let's take a 1-minute trip back down memory lane to see what yesterday was all about. Wonderful, beautiful work by Gary from
Well done, Gary. Yes, that is awesome. And
2 humans, he saw that at the end. Right.
What a day it was. Lots and lots jam-packed, even more than we saw on the video there.
And thank you for those of you who stayed on for the workshops, that they were filled to capacity and beyond. So we'll expand those workshops next year as well.
Yeah, so day one, we saw through part one of the conference, AI for Change, from Harris Schwabe's eye-opening insights, and I think there was really a lot for us all to take away there, on AI adoption, to our international speakers showing us the art of the possible. We definitely kicked off with a bang yesterday.
That's right. Yeah, so besides the LLM workshops in the afternoon, we of course also had the Rock and Heal semifinals, which some of you were there as well, and lots of great talks on our heroes from IMH and WH and KTPH and all their work at on AI at our exhibition halls in level 2.
Yes,
so we hope you're energized for parts 2, 3, and 4 of the conference today.
Exactly. We really are, as you can tell, but excitedly jumping over each other there. So, as this is an AI conference, we really needed to bring AI into your conference experience in different ways. It would be pretty remiss of us if we didn't, right?
That's right.
We have a few AI-powered surprises up our sleeves for you.
So for those of you who didn't join us yesterday, we'll just have to let you know that AI takes part in this conference and had a big role to play as well. So these scripts, whether they're on a non-sustainable or sustainable format, were also co-written by AI. Our post-event recordings will be converted into podcasts, and you can download them as well. And even our 2025 logo that you see there, again, the great work of Gary, was co-rendered by AI as well.
AI is also hard at work behind the scenes, creating summaries and key takeaways of all of our talks and panels. I don't know if any of you took a look yesterday, but we were reading through live time. Also generating the opening question for all of our panels. So that happened yesterday, it will happen again today, as though AI is a member of the audience with you, asking questions alongside you. If you joined us yesterday morning, you would also have seen AI, Taylor Swift, my fashion inspiration today, teaching us AI 101. But if you missed it, don't worry. Later today, we're going to work through together to co-create a conference theme song using AI.
Tams is very excited about that.
I am really excited about this.
That's why she wore these boots. All right, so those are our conference highlights, and our top highlight, perhaps, of today that's going to bring the house down, we think, will be our debate. And as many of you know, for the first time in healthcare history, we're going to have 3 human debaters from healthcare and beyond going head-to-head with 3 AI debaters. So fingers crossed for that.
I was stopped yesterday by a number of people who were very excited about this. I know that Face-Off is one of your most exciting moments, so let's wait and see. Okay, but that's not all we have to look forward to today. I give you full permission to take out your phones. I see some of you are ahead of the curve on that. You can take out your phone and open your virtual badge for the conference. You'd have received that after checking in at the registration count earlier. And you should find something like that on your screen. So if you can hover on the 3rd button on your virtual badge, illustrated there, you'll see the AI in Action HEAL Awards 2025.
So this is an award that was initiated by NHG to champion and spotlight ground-up initiatives that use Gen AI. But we want you, the audience, to vote for the People's Choice Award. So if you haven't done so yet yesterday, you need to do this today.
Yeah, so a little reminder of how to do that. Head off to the nominees gallery where you can view the posters there. You can have a look at all of the 9 posters of the finalist solutions. Also, if you prefer physical, not digital, you can actually take a look at level 4, the chirp area where the posters are also on display. Once you've taken a look at the projects, do cast your vote. You see the 2nd button there on the right to select your favorite project for the People's Choice Award. Now, the important information here, voting closes at 4 o'clock today. We will, of course, remind you, but don't miss out on your chance to vote.
Right, and the voting is also not just restricted to the you guys, the attendees at the conference. Please forward the link to your friends and supporters as well. Make this viral and get more voters for all our finalists.
Okay, so what's coming next?
All right, so yesterday was part 1 of our conference. So day 2 looks after part 2, 3, and 4. You'll remember that part 1 was all AI for change. So part 2 of our conference, we're switching just the words around, is change for AI, where we're going to hear from patient advocates, regulatory experts and leaders sharing how they themselves have had to transform and change to bring AI into their lives and their work lives.
Yeah, then part 3. I'm going to share part 3.
All right, yeah. You do part 3.
AI for all. We're going to show you real-world stories of how our frontline champions and industry leaders have adopted AI and really keeping it real, not all the glossy stuff. They'll be sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly experiences.
Then our final permutation for our 4th chapter is all for AI. And we're going to hear from someone whose journey we hope will inspire you. It's inspired me, from being a patient to someone now who is an innovation leader, designing AI solutions for visually impaired people. That's going to be a powerful reminder for why we're all here today, to use AI to make lives better.
So really an exciting day, an empowering day. Can't wait to get started.
Yeah. Let's kick off day 2 finally with our opening speaker, a practicing physician turned digital health pioneer. Trishan Panch is the inaugural recipient of Harvard's Public Health Innovation Award and the creator of Harvard's AI for Healthcare program. So he's in America, but let's see if we can bring him onto the screen now, dialing all the way from the US. That's great. Trishan, can you hear and see us? We're here.
Yeah,
Great.
I can. Hi, nice to see you.
All right. Good morning.
Good evening.
Good evening. All right. So
Yeah, good evening.
we've
Good
got a
morning.
great. You can't see
Good
the
afternoon.
audience that well. They're just behind this shot here. But
They're all waving at you.
all right.
Hi, everyone from behind your heads.
All right. So we're ready for you, Trishan, and the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a fun event, which you don't often get to say for technology-oriented conferences. So I wish I could be there in person. Just travel meant that I can't. Well, it wasn't really travel, honestly. It's just that I'd have had to like borrow childcare responsibility favors, which I have a significant debt in that area already. So therefore, I just couldn't do it. But I'd love to come in future. I'm a big fan of Singapore. So, okay, I'm going to go into some stuff that we cover on our course, but really what I want to do here is I'll give you a bit of an introduction to who I am, why I'm talking to you from the ether, and also what I'd like to do is kind of just make sure we have a common understanding of the context of what problem AI is meant to be a solution for. And then I'll cover a little bit from first principles about what we're actually talking about, because we have found that often when people are talking about AI or what AI can do and can't do and might be able to do and might not be able to do, they're often talking at cross purposes because they're talking about different generations or epochs of the technology that have very different capabilities, but also very different limitations. And I feel duty bound to like give you at least some flavor of what those epochs are, so you can get some building blocks of understanding. Now, of course, in half an hour, we're not going to get to full first principles understanding of what's going on here. One could argue that no one has that, which would be a reasonable argument now, given the complexity and the pace of change. But I feel it's important that we kind of go into where we are now and give you some just first principles understanding of what's going on. And without any technical background, it should actually be fairly intuitive. And then what we're going to talk about is, well, okay, that's great. What next? There's something going on. It's something potentially very general, something potentially with a lot of impact in healthcare. But how do we get from where we are now to something? And I would argue that something that's often overlooked in kind of digital health and digital transformation, the workforce, can be a significant catalyst. And how our work here in putting together a course to train the next generation of AI first or AI ready healthcare leaders, how we were thinking about that basically. And then I'll spotlight one of our alum who's been kind of took our course and then is working on implementing some of these technologies in the field. Maybe that's something that many of you are already in. It sounds like Hon Tim has already made this journey himself, and others will be thinking about it. So we'll give you a little bit of an example how you can go from essentially like a clinical background without any significant technical background into becoming an AI leader. So I'm just going to get into it. If in the interest of time, there's a bunch of stuff. If someone could give me like a 10-minute or warning, that would be great. If not, I'll try and keep myself on track. with the time here. But okay, so I'm just going to get into it. We'll kind of speed up a little bit, but there's a recording of this, and there's also going to be a bunch of other tools that I'm going to make available to you. So just let it kind of wash over you a little bit, and some of it will stick, but the more, and go over it a few times. And there's a bunch of kind of fundamental principles in here that just sound a bit strange the first time you hear them, but once they make intuitive sense, you have a lot more ability to hear about AI and it not feel like word salad. And I know for many of you, although there's really unfashionable and uncool to say so, it's going to feel that way. And that's perfectly fine. But I just want to kind of say we're going to open the black box and it's not going to be scary and you're going to have an understanding of what's going on here. So my background, I'm originally from Sri Lanka, actually, and then I grew up in England. That's where my accent is from. I trained in medicine in London, practiced medicine in London, came here to HSBH, Harvard School of Public Health, to do a master's in public health. Took a bit of a detour, I suppose, or maybe I would see it as like a extension of a different set of methods towards the public health goals of software. I started a software company out of some research I was doing at MIT with some folks there, and I ran that for 12 years. We sold that to Blackstone. I then did two things. I started a venture studio investing in other Harvard and MIT faculty, and I'm not going to talk about any of those companies here, but in the interest of full disclosure, I've listed them here. We don't really discuss them at all with respect to this, but that's basically what I do for most of my time. But alongside that, I became president of the Alumni Association at the Harvard School of Public Health. That means a number of different things, but one of the things it means is that there's 13,000 alum of the school, many in Singapore, actually. Singapore is hugely overrepresented in terms of number of HSBH alum per capita. One of my kind of things I was looking at was how can we better support the alum? And what became very clear is that there was a strong interest in digital skills training for healthcare leaders, but in particular in this area of AI. So I got involved in setting up this course, and I'm going to take you through a flavor of what we do on the course and how it might be relevant to some of the challenges facing the health system in Singapore, or arguably not. And I'm going to give you some of the tools to kind of critically evaluate that yourselves. Okay, so basically, let's get into the kind of context stuff. So, I mean, I think obviously this is news to no one, but really the fundamental issue, which is facing every health system in the world in some way or another, is a mismatch of growing demand meeting constrained supply, and supply that's actually constrained in a very interesting way that feels very difficult to fix at the moment. So on the demand side, and this I believe is the up-to-date data from Singapore. So you have, just like everywhere else, an aging population, quite radical reduction in the support ratio. Many Asian countries, particularly East Asian countries, have that, of course. You have this surge in chronic diseases, a health system that was incredibly well optimized for acute conditions and communicable diseases. Maybe that delivery model doesn't track as well for these long-term behaviorally linked conditions that may actually, many people argue, just be a simple mismatch between humans and the modern environment. The human body that was optimized by evolution for a certain kind of environment, and the environment that we've created in the last 50 years or so. And another indicator of that, of course, is this paradox where you have societies have got richer, they've particularly got more digitized, and people have started feeling worse. And many will say, well, yeah, maybe they felt the same, but like, we've all become softer, and you're no longer like shy, you now have social phobia, and we're kind of over medicalizing these things, which is plausible. However, I think the thing to bear in mind here is that here in the US, where we are, if you look at kids, so I work at Boston Children's Hospital, and one of the things that we've been looking at a lot is the prevalence of anxiety spectrum disorders in under 21s in our population has gone up tenfold in the last 10 years. And it's a linear trend, and obviously went up during the pandemic, but the asymptote is a linear function up and to the right. So that's not just case identification. There's something else structural going on there. So we will, so something's going on in society. Like there are more demands on a health system, and maybe a different kind of health system to the one we have. But the health system that we do have is facing some pressures, which in Singapore are very similar to those here. You have a shortage of staff. and immigration can address some of that, of course, but there will still be a shortage of staff because we need trained staff in very specific areas. And the existing clinicians being stretched are reporting record levels of burnout. Now, that's also in the context of fiscal pressure. So I have to say, the number that really jumps out here from the US is it's utter science fiction in this country that we could reach anywhere close to 6% of GDP spent on health and achieve the level of health outcomes that you all do. So, the US is spending 3 times that at least and achieving much worse health outcomes with respect to non-communicable disease. So take of that what you will, but every country is facing this thing where the ability to pay for the rising demand is relatively constrained. So the argument, therefore, is, well, there has to be some better solution, right? And like people have talked about using software, the digital health area, which is kind of, where I've been involved for the last decade or so. And then now AI. So why AI and what can AI do and how can it work in the clinical context? And can it be a solution for this challenge? That's what we're going to go into now for the next kind of 10 minutes or so. So let me get into it. So, okay, so basically there's going to be a question coming up in a bit after this section. I'm not really totally sure how I can gauge your responses. So I might just have to ask questions and then you either think about them in your head or call them out, and I'll imagine I can hear your answer because we've gone through material a lot in class, and maybe we can discuss it later if we have some time in the panel component. But basically, like, one of the core ideas here is that this field of AI has radically changed, and I would argue it's changed in 3 particular eras, right? So the first era of AI, which I would imagine no one in this room would have cared about, it was a curiosity in psychology and in computer science and in philosophy of, like, is there a way of describing thinking in explicit rules that you write down? And if you tell computers those rules, computers can think in some way. And unsurprisingly, the punchline is, well, the answer is basically no, because lots of people tried it for a long time, didn't work. Then in 2011, something very interesting started happening. So a set of techniques called neural networks. So it's looking at how, well, the simple analogy is, well, we know that humans have some degree of intelligence, at least on a good day, I suppose. And how is that implemented in biology, right? In carbon-based life forms? Well, there's networks of neurons, and the strengths of the connection are learned through exposure. And once those connections are established, humans can do things that they weren't able to do at birth or before exposure to the environment. So that was neural networks. There was a set of techniques and just a volume of data and more powerful computers that meant these problems in the world that we couldn't describe in rules, which is many, we could expose this thing called a deep neural network to that area. For example, one of the main areas was like, if you got a picture and you want to identify what's in the picture, it's very difficult to write a set of rules that does that in every single scenario. But if you show one of these deep neural networks lots of examples, it starts to understand what is the representation of pixels that is that particular object. And same thing for game playing and a number of different things. That is what started this field of AI in the modern sense that anyone cares about. And the problem with that approach, as you might be able to intuit, is that it was very dependent on the kind of data you were giving it. And things that were good at identifying things in pictures were horrible at identifying things in X-rays. Things that were good there were bad at predicting the next word in a sequence, for example. They were very fragile and very brittle and weren't very general. It was what's so-called narrow AI. Then around 2017, we entered a new paradigm. And that's when the deep neural networks got bigger and a group of researchers developed a new architecture, a new version, a new tuning of them, if you will, that allowed them to be particularly suited to looking at sequences. And of course, lots of nature is in sequences, language is in sequences, right? The stuff I'm saying now, at least I hope, is having listened to the stuff I said a couple of minutes ago is going to help with understanding what I'm saying now. And you kind of remember that stuff in your mind, I would hope. It informs kind of what you're thinking about what I'm saying next. And the words that are coming out of my mouth are influenced by the words that I was thinking before, etc. So like those long dependent sequences If you could get AI to, could you get AI to do that, which you couldn't before? And if you could, what would be possible? That was the question some researchers were asking, and they answered it with a particular set of models called transformers, and that enabled this area of generative AI. And I'm gonna, I think you've heard the term multiple times. Actually, Tamsin and Hong Tim discussed different applications of generative AI, generating stuff with AI. That's kind of why it's called generative AI. But how does it have this generative capability, right? It's an important, I'm sure, question you asked yourselves. And we're going to go a little bit to building some intuition in terms of answering it. So here is a sequence of words, right? And I'm going to ask you all, in your mind, just to try and think through what the next word in the sequence is. Okay, now, of course, it could be anything. And some of you, it could be literally anything. There's a huge search space. But some of you might have come up with the definite article the. And that would be the correct answer in this case, right? But if you just try and reflect a bit, why did you know it was the? And why wasn't it like tomato or stone or coffee? Or I'm just looking at the things around me here. But the reason is that you've seen a lot of language, and your brain knows that I found tends to follow the specific article tends to follow, and the is one of the most common things there. So just with general knowledge of having seen a lot of English in this case, you can take a massive search space and reduce it fairly considerably. Now, but of course, what's after that? It's essentially impossible. With knowledge of language, you can't get that, right? So basically, but if I was to tell you that, well, this sentence comes from reviews of our course here at Harvard from the students, you might be able to guess that it's going to be something like lesson or course or something like that. That would be a reasonable guess. So with some specific context, you've been able to get much closer, right? This could be anything, and you've got very close to the answer. And then if I said you have to guess what's next, you'd probably infer that it would be a bit eccentric of me to give you something saying I found the lesson totally useless and I wish I'd stayed at home, because that would be a bit of a weird thing to do. And it's more likely that I'd say something positive. So therefore, you'd probably guess something like this. Now, what I want you to reflect on is what is the combinatorial space here, the number of possibilities of this is essentially not infinite, but huge. But actually, with a few clues, you probably got fairly close to predicting this fairly banal sentence. And the reason for that is that you have some general understanding of the statistical association between words, one, and two, you have some specific context that lets you refine that to a very kind of narrow point or set of points of possibilities in terms of what this sequence could be. And that, when you type something into ChatGPT, is essentially what's going on. It's seen a lot of language, so it understands when some kind of things are put in, other kind of things follow. That happens to be an answer following a question. But then, and you're also giving it very specific context in the question about the kind of things you're looking for. And the more things you've put in the context window, the better it understands and the more accurate it can be. So that's the basic intuition about what's going on when you type something into ChatGPT, what's going on with generative AI. It's just seen a lot of sequences of stuff, and it's this machine that's trying to predict the next thing in the sequence. And you give it some specific context by inputting a photo or inputting a command or putting some text in, and that gives it the context it needs and some idea of what you want it to produce for it to kind of follow on the sequence. Okay, so I hope that kind of makes sense. It's a little bit abstract, and if it doesn't, that's kind of fine as well. But I just wanted to kind of establish that first thing of understanding. Now, the problem with this approach, and it's the problem with AI in general, right, is that no one knows actually how that works in a deterministic sense. I would argue for a doctor like myself, I might be able to explain why I made a diagnosis or chose a certain path in management, but I can't explain it at a neuronal level. I can't tell you exactly what path through my, from my ears to the cortex to different bits of my brain to out my mouth, that would be explained. And essentially it's the same intuition here with AI, but it creates this very unsatisfactory state of affairs for some, at least, and certainly for policymakers who have a high bar for explainability, quite reasonably, especially in high risk areas like AI. So Dario Amodei, who was the CEO of Anthropic, said this thing: when a generative AI system does something like summarize a financial document, we have no idea at a specific or precise level why it makes the choices it does, why it chooses certain words over others, or why it occasionally makes a mistake despite being usually accurate. So it's occasionally savant, often savant, one could argue, but occasionally infantile. And we can't really predict where those areas are going to be, at least so it has been. So clearly, like, I'm sure some of you are saying, okay, so AI stuff's cool, I get some sense of it, but that doesn't really seem, something like that doesn't seem ready for prime time in medicine. And that would be a totally reasonable thing to think. But, and that's really where the state of the art with AI was maybe like two years ago or so, which is kind of, you know, a whole epoch, actually to use a previous language, in the AI world. But I'm going to help build another bit of intuition now. So what else was needed on top of the core models to get a bit closer to kind of being able to be useful in medicine? So I'm going to ask you all a question, and it'd be great if I get one of you to answer, but I don't think technically that's going to be possible. So just hold the thought in your head, right? And I'm going to ask you a question, and you just have to just note the first answer that comes into your head. And it's a very simple question. We ask the students here a lot. It's like, you don't need any kind of materials or anything. It's just like first thing that comes into your head, right? So there's two items. There's a bat and a ball, and the bat costs $1 more than the ball, and the bat and the ball together cost $1.10. So the question is, how much does the ball cost? Okay, so many of you will have thought the answer, which is the most common answer, which is 10 cents. And 10 cents would feel right. Two items, bat and a ball, one costs $1 more than the other. They cost $1.10, so it's probably $1.10. And of course, that will feel like the right answer, but it's wrong. And if you deliberately wrote it out, which no one you know, normal is going to have the time or the inclination to do with algebra, you basically figure out that the ball must cost 5 cents, of course, because it's $1 more. So it's 5 cents and $1.05, which together equal $1.10. And if you write it out in algebra, it's obvious, but your brain, and you're all very intelligent, is telling you a totally different answer. And what that is basically, there's like, this is some work from Daniel Kahneman, who some of you will be familiar with, of like thinking fast and slow. There's like two systems of thinking in the brain: the fast, intuitive, associative. And that's really where this first generation of AI models was. That's the kind of connection between the two. Just like the first kind of answer that appears into to the model is shared. But that isn't good for things that necessarily require a bit of deliberation. And what happened was, around about a year ago, is we had a set of models, actually earlier this year, sorry, it feels like a year ago, but it's actually earlier this year, a set of models that basically had a revised architecture that was very good at this deliberate thinking. And DeepSeek, obviously, I'm sure many of you had heard of. There's Gemini, which many of you have heard of and use from Google. And then there's the O1, O3, O4 family of models from OpenAI. What they're basically doing is just they get the output from the model, and then they cogitate over it in a series of steps to answer more complex questions. Now, of course, that seems much closer to what might be beneficial or tractable, at least in medicine, than what we saw before. And so it's been. So these are two, as a big group of researchers, but Vivek Natarajan and Alan Karthikesalingam are the two senior authors here, and they teach on my course. But I think this is they applied this set of reasoning model techniques to the problem of diagnosis from basically free-form chat in medicine. That's a very hard problem. I hope from what we've discussed thus far, you kind of realize it doesn't fit a rules-based approach because patients use language in all kinds of different ways. It probably doesn't fit a just training on loads of language, on loads of like question answer pairs from patients, because obviously if that was the case, then we would have had these systems a while ago. It requires something a little bit different. And this set of generative techniques with the reasoning is the approach that these guys took. And basically, just to show a point, they started applying these transformer models to medical question answering, so multiple choice questions, and got like, you see like over a 2-year period how far the field got, and we're getting very close to 100% now, which is great. But of course, the more difficult thing of and this is really where the rubber's going to meet the road in terms of applying these techniques in medicine, is you basically have to apply this clinical knowledge to patient information that comes from, history and symptoms and signs and all that stuff to form some kind of hypothesis, a case representation, and then almost play this game with patients where you basically, like, based on what you think, you ask them some questions, they say some stuff, you refine your understanding until you get to a certain level of confidence. That's a diagnosis, and then it's planned for treatment, right? Hard, like essentially like a fiendishly large game, basically, like a two-player game, where the stakes are incredibly high. So there wasn't really a good technical solution to that till basically last year when this group of researchers came up with them. And this is basically a simulation. This is basically what they did. Patients had a chat. They were chatting over a phone or the web. They didn't know whether they were talking to an AI or a human clinician. So someone like myself or an AI. And basically then the responses were evaluated and the findings were remarkable. Basically what you had is that the AI was superior superior or non-inferior in every aspect, including most noticeably, like, did the patients feel that it was empathic, that it displayed empathy. And these were blinded evaluations and also blinded, so the patients were blinded and the assessors of the transcripts were blinded as well. So that was a landmark result. We didn't really kind of see that. The same group of researchers extended this again into the area of management. So again, Alan, Vivek, and their team at Google. This is a preprint, but it's in under peer review at the moment. And they basically came up with a different system now for the problem of, like, looking at this deep problem in medicine of, like, you made a diagnosis, now you need to figure out what to do. And in this case, what they did is a bunch of AIs working together. So one to talk with the patient, another to have some sense of where the patient is, the patient state or agent state, and the other to look at the literature and tell the first model, given what the patient's asking and what their differential diagnoses, summary, and history are, what do you need to say? So that collaboration between different AIs is really like where people talk about agents and agentic systems and agentic AI. That's really what they're talking about. They're talking about AI that can interact in the environment, often working with other AIs to achieve a goal. And that's really where this field is gone from, like, association to reasoning models, and reasoning models to agents being able to learn themselves through interaction in an environment. Like, that's where we are on the kind of research and technical front with this. And they're here, and we're applying these things in the scientific process. And many people think that, like, that we're going to have these teams where we're restructuring teams, and we're already doing it here. I'm working with one of these groups. And what you find is that there's basically new roles of interacting with the AI, and someone's full-time job is passing the outputs of the AI, and then we're working with it within the scientific team. And many people think, including me, that this is like a barometer. This is a kind of a bellwether of where all knowledge work is going to go. And that's maybe a chilling thought for some, maybe an encouraging thought for others. However, just going back to the context, sure, many of you are feeling, in healthcare, we have this unique setup, right, the world over. So no one wants to be first, no one wants to be last. Clinicians are naturally skeptical. We're trained to be so. We have to think about the edge cases. We have to think about risks. And organizations are facing the challenges of supply-demand mismatch that we discussed, and also change fatigue. Also, what we found, or what was clear, is that most leaders, very intelligent people, but not necessarily digital natives. And even if they were digital natives, as we discussed before, the paradigm of modern AI is so different to, like, that 1.0 version of, like, rules-based software, that it requires a very different set of skills and a very different set of thinking. And also, AI itself is developing rapidly, and it's incredibly general. So that presents some kind of unique challenges. And what I felt back in 2021 is that really we had to invest in people here. The thing that was always left till last, let's, like, build the clinical leadership to achieve the potential of the technology. That wasn't going to happen by accident. So, I had some time. We'd sold the company. I had, some time to, like, figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I was kind of thinking, I had the role with the Alumni Association. We set up this program. It was the first, we did it during COVID. It was the first AI in healthcare program at Harvard, and then we basically turned it into a certificate program, and we've had like now just over 600 alumni across like 35 countries or so. And it's we now do 4 courses, and people take them all in sequence, and we do the last one with the Mayo Clinic here in Minnesota, and we have this whole cadre of AI-ready healthcare leaders who have gone this natural experiment and gone have done stuff in the world. And one thing I just wanted to like put a point on here is that during the course, there's lots of different ways that AI tools can be helpful in the pedagogical process itself. So, firstly, we think the purpose of the course is to basically get people together in a community, and I'm going to touch on that later. We think actually that's the primary purpose, these resilient lifelong learning communities. Secondly, there's no textbooks for this stuff. Well, not the stuff that's interesting. Really, what you have to do is get people who are practitioners to come together and reflect. And, we use the convening power of the institution here, which still, in spite of what you may have heard from the political side, has some kind of gravity to bring together the best thinkers and best practitioners to share their wisdom. Then basically every day there's a summary podcast. All of the transcripts get put into a bot that provides better answers than I or any of the faculty do. And together we produce a computationally generated textbook. It's a 100-page textbook, indexed, referenced, of all of the discussions and all of the lectures which the students get at the end. So that obviously wouldn't be possible without a set of technologies. But we believe strongly, and this is why is my kind of final soapbox moment here, that if the interest is in applying these technologies, just learning about it in a passive way is not enough. I think just as Hong Tim is doing, as many of you I hope in the audience are doing, there's never been a better time to actually build solutions. And that building together is incredibly important, antithetical to the way clinicians and managers are trained. But we're not really going to get anywhere meaningful unless we have leaders actually interested in building as well, I believe. So, but in order to enable that, organizations need to create a kind of sandbox environment. So, here at Harvard, because we've had all of the students go through, many of them have asked us, well, look, now I want to build a solution. I don't have access to engineers where we are. I don't have access to people who can think about the business side. So, we create like a virtual lab for the students after they've done the courses to develop things over time together. And some of them go off to develop their own organizations afterwards, which is great. But it's really evolved. It's really affected my thinking. And I really believe strongly now that the purpose of education anywhere, any kind of graduate education, is basically, if you think about it, it's not actually to impart the knowledge, because especially in this field, the knowledge becomes redundant very quickly. But what it's to do is through like a common experience to develop a social connection, like a learning community, and for that learning community to be able to interact with each other over time as they develop solutions, as they get things right, get things wrong. And that basically is the principal endowment of universities, is not to teach the knowledge, it's because the knowledge and the convening of people together enables that connection that builds the community. So we feel very strongly with that about that. I think I'm over time, but I just don't know, I'm afraid. So I'm just going to wrap up quickly. But I just wanted to just as a little kind of vignette here, Ankur, who took our course last year, very interesting guy, was a banker, then became a pediatrician, was working as a staff pediatrician at a large academic medical center here, didn't really have any particular AI background, took the course, kind of drank the Kool-Aid, as they say here in America, started believing the gospel. We worked with him, put together an AI strategy for his organization, pitched it to the new CEO, developed like a funding proposal for major donors, thought about what the priorities might be. We felt strongly that like starting to use some of the available AI, like a horizontal platform in back office operations, could generate quick wins. Specifically looked at IT operations, incubated a company because there was a similar need with one of the other students from Boston Children's Hospital. And that now is a company, Incident Commander, that's kind of going forward in and of itself. So that just shows what's possible. I mean, Ankur is a great guy, which is why I am particularly skilled. But we want to kind of create a movement of people doing this, because we think from the public health point of view that like if our interest is in the application of this technology to not just achieve the highest level of gains in the short term, but also in the long term and also with the fairest distribution. And that's going to require people such as yourselves being conversant in the technologies and able to lead the charge. So that is a kind of critical need, and we're really never going to implement these technologies unless that's addressed, in my opinion. So I know I've kind of overstayed my welcome, so I'm just actually going to just kind of go ahead and say that, like, you know, that is our punchline in a way, that like the technology is not enough. The workforce needs to be considered as a catalyst for change. And if, like, you know, the fundamental purpose, our mission here is to build resilient, lifelong learning communities, and through that to develop AI leaders, hopefully such as yourselves. Great, thanks so much. If you, I can, there's a bunch of different materials around this. There's maybe questions you've got. I'm more than happy to answer them. These are my email addresses, personal one on the right-hand side, Harvard one on the left, or I'm on LinkedIn or any of those kind of things as well. And I apologize if I've overrun and messed up the schedule.
I would like to give a warm welcome to the moderator of the next panel, Professor Teo Yik Ying. I can't even speak.
Teo Yik
Ying. Not enough coffee yet this morning. The Dean of Saw Swee Hock School of Public Health. Good morning, Wai Wai.
All right.
Thank you so much. And he will be joined by 3 fellow panelists, Candy, Cora, and Ricardo. Could I invite you to the stage as well, please? Thank you so much.
All the best.
Morning. Hello.
Thank you, Candy.
Hello. Over to you, Wai Wai.
Thanks very much, Tamsin. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Wai Wai. Many of you would just call me Wai Wai. So we've heard a very good and invigorating introduction by Trishan, and I'm sure many of us would have questions. Today we have 3 very prominent panelists who have actually worked in AI and have use cases to share about in AI. And what we would do for the next 15 minutes or so is to actually invite each of them to share a little bit about what they have been doing and how AI have changed the way that they operate. And then after that, we will have a Q&A, and we will invite Trishan back then. So perhaps I could start off with Candy, because I know that you have some exciting things happening in type 1 diabetes that you would like to share with us. So Candy, over to you first, and then we will kick off from there.
Thanks, Wai Wai, and thank you to the CHI team for allowing me to be here. So it's always nice to hear in conferences these days that because we want to be more patient-centered, you let the patient go first. And this is news hot off the press, so I didn't even get time to put it in my slides, but I want to do a huge shout out to the US for designing the very first Barbie doll that is wearing the same medical devices as me. So for many, many years, actually never in my life, have I been able to say that a Barbie now looks like me. And you'll see what I'm talking about soon. So I'm from an organization called TypeOne.sg. It's okay if you haven't heard of us, because prevalence of type 1 diabetes is honestly quite small in Singapore. But how I like to start is also reminding people that a small prevalence doesn't mean a small voice. So we have close to 600 members, comprising of patients, caregivers, their support network, and we launched a WhatsApp WhatsApp community earlier this year, which already has 160 members. And this community is run by myself and 4 other very, very passionate volunteers, and we have divided interest groups into lifestyle, into female-related topics, really anything that relates to living and thriving with diabetes. And this is especially important to me because I didn't grow up with this kind of community. And I know that a lot of you guys are in the healthcare space here, in the medical, well, practicing medicine, so this is just a very short recap on what type 1 diabetes is. It's the chronic autoimmune version of diabetes, where our bodies don't produce any insulin, and people like me, we will be doing multiple daily injections or using an insulin pump, so oral medications don't work. And when we take in insulin externally, it's lifelong, and that's probably when the parents, especially of very young kids, get hit the hardest. And while it's common to think that type 1 diabetes is diagnosed in children. Actually, globally, more than 50% of the prevalence is actually in adulthood. So it's kind of a myth that type 1 is just linked to pediatric conditions. Of course, being in an Asian country, some of the common misconceptions are a little bit exacerbated here, but it's not society's fault per se, because we are often influenced by the thoughts and the narratives in our society put out by the government, etc. But all of the statements that you see here are real statements that have been said to kids in my community. And this is what it feels like maybe not having a community to turn to when I was young. So this photo is one that my own mom can't really look at anymore because it was just before I was diagnosed. And this is a snapshot of the equipment that my parents and me grew up using. So of course you see more tech devices because that's the benefit of rapidly developing technology. But having lived with diabetes for 27 years now, I've used 62,500 needles on myself. This is excluding what the usual hospital tests give me. And out of this big number of daily needles, about 3/4 of that is linked to blood glucose tests, and the remaining is linked to insulin delivery. So when people ask me how type 1 diabetes feels, this is what I usually tell them. Now, I'm here to talk to you about what AI has done for diabetes care. And I don't have that much long left, so you're going to have to bear with me while I speed up a little bit. To go back to the start, insulin was founded in 1922. So before this, people with type 1 diabetes will just pass away. And this is what the very first insulin pump looked like. Concept developed in the 1960s. You can see it looks really ugly, so it wasn't really commercialized until the 1990s. And then now here we are in 2016, when we have the first advanced hybrid closed-loop pump that was commercialized by Medtronic, and now with many more companies on the market too. But essentially what this means is that it has changed the way that we measure self-management in diabetes. Because with technology, we're able to look at time in range, not just the archaic measure of HbA1c. That doesn't really give you a good picture of how someone like me is managing. Time in range is the percent of time that a person's blood glucose stays within a target range. And of course, that target range can be configured to what type of diabetes you have. So for instance, my target range will be different to someone with type 2. And then when the pretty much AI pump came on the market in 2016, it gave us a new way to even achieve this better new measurement of diabetes. So actually, to me, the most important thing on this slide would be these words here, because the clinicians will be caring about whether we're meeting your outcomes. But to me, using technology means more self-empowerment, more freedom to actually feel a little bit more normal. So, quick summary of what the AHCL is. 4 components: human, continuous glucose monitor, insulin pump, and the AI algorithm inside the insulin pump. If my blood glucose goes too high, it will start to titrate little bits of insulin to slowly bring it down. And conversely, if I'm going too low, the pump itself will start to stop the insulin delivery. There is no doctor in this communication loop. And it makes a world of a difference, trust me. But don't just take it from me. This is what people from my community, existing users of the AI pump, feel. When you can hear that someone says, I feel like the quality of my life has improved, that, I think, to the medical community, is the real music to our ears. So I want to end with this photo. It's one that I took from the Nobel Peace Prize Museum in Oslo earlier this year. It might look like the environments that you sometimes work in, where you have different hospitals, different departments, or different organizations. They're trying to paint their view of the world, and everyone's trying to do their own thing, trying to put in their own understanding. And it takes a little bit more to stand up and look around and see, oh, actually, we kind of are working maybe towards the same thing, but not exactly the same way. There may be some conflicts, there may be some issues. How can we do better to harmonize? It takes a little bit more to stand up on that ladder. And I'm guessing because you have your own interdependencies, your own challenges in your institutions. But I want to say from a patient's point of view that we might feel this way when we move through your hospital system, through your healthcare system, where we see different departments interacting with us, treating us in different ways. And to us, that still counts all as the same thing because that is one patient experience for us. Now, I know that's not the best note to end on, but don't worry. What I actually want you to remember is that, look, I am the patient representative on this panel, and I want to remind you that you are all doing impactful and significantly amazing work already in what you are doing. So the stretch question that I want to put out to you is that in what you are building or what you are planning to work together on, how can you make people like me feel like the heroes of our own stories again? Because that, I think, is the real power of AI in healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Candy. And actually, she says she ended off on a negative note. I disagree, because I think there is a very important message here, which Trishan, in his keynote speech, he actually talked about, which is how he's used AI and the patients actually reported greater empathy when interacting with a chatbot or on a device that they didn't know whether it was a chatbot or it was humans. So technology actually helped patients feel more normal and feel more empowered. So that is not a negative note, but that is a very positive and powerful thing, powerful note to think about. Because when we think about artificial intelligence, there's always this perception that, well, things are out of control, like what Trishan says. There's a black box that's governing things. But from a patient standpoint, which you have heard firsthand, it can make them feel more empowered and, in fact, more normal. So this is a very powerful element that, ironically, using AI help patients feel better and integrated to society. So that's one message that we'll come back to later on. But next, I would like to introduce Cora. Cora is the Chief Health Officer from the University of California Health. So very large group of employees that are in your hands. The health of the employees are in your hands. So over to you, Cora.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to switch perspectives and talk about the health system perspective with the thought of how we are changing to bring AI into our system. But before I talk about the how, I'm going to start out with the why. And then I'm actually going to end with the who, and therefore create sort of a whole circle of AI governance. So let me start with this. What is the value proposition for AI governance? Because I know that we talk about it a lot, but if we're very honest with ourselves, in order to create the building and the community that Trishan talked about in his keynote, we also need to build the governance. We need to build the guardrails, because that governance will enable us to adopt these technologies as they are evolving quickly. It is sort of paradoxical, but when I finished a large project at the University of California, people talked about it as an end. And I said, oh no, actually, we are just at the beginning, because it is these guardrails that will enable us actually to become more agile as these technologies are evolving. So let me start out with the first value proposition here, and it's a word that has been discussed a lot over this conference and is absolutely critical, and that is trust. AI governance builds trust with end users and those impacted, and those include patients, absolutely, and they also include providers. Importantly, so that providers trust that these tools will not be taking over their autonomy or their competency. AI also builds trust through governance with administrators, so that we don't think that there is something that we cannot tackle, even when there is unknowns. And finally, the community as well. AI governance enables the vetting and authorization of tools more quickly and in a transparent, replicable manner. And this is helpful to build, I think, muscle memory when it comes to change management, so that as new types of tools, we move from machine learning to generative to agentic, we're able to work together as a system because we already have processes and bodies that have come together to handle these types of challenges. Of course, governance reduces the risk of unexpected harm and reputational damage. No one ever wants to end up the subject of an international news story. And then it ensures compliance with existing and evolving laws and regulations. And I would argue actually enables the more thoughtful development of those laws and regulations so that they have the right balance between being prescriptive and being innovative. And then finally, and this is really kind of an overarching point, it promotes a safe and ethical innovation ecosystem, because I think that's really what we want to create. We want to create an ecosystem where people aren't afraid to build, where they're excited to work with their colleagues and work with people outside of their particular teams to be able to build tools that might be able to not just make things move faster, but also transform the way care is delivered. Okay, I'll turn now to the how. And of course, as part of the how, it's important that tools be validated at the outset, and that they be fair, and that, of course, they be safe, and that there be ethical considerations. But as was mentioned before, there are a number of tools which are validated at the beginning. So they've been determined, for example, by the FDA to be safe. Perhaps 1,000 or 1,000+ tools might be in that category. But why then are there so many fewer tools that have really produced successful ROI across a number of different metrics once they're actually deployed in the healthcare delivery system? I think some of the speakers yesterday mentioned some of the things that go into why there are so many tools at the front end, but then actually relatively far fewer in terms of their success rate on the back end. And I'll mention that one of them, in my view, is that initial validation is really only the first step, and that it's really essential to evaluate clinical effectiveness for success and measure and monitor implementation over time. Are these technologies actually improving patient outcomes? Are they improving treatment and workflow efficiencies? And are they cost effective? And this might actually differ, in my view, across different types of health systems, because workflows have many similarities, but there are also differences depending on local processes. And this article here is one from some of my colleagues at UC San Diego Health, but they call for artificial intelligence implementation science centers so that there should be additional research to evaluate clinical effectiveness, given the importance of clinical effectiveness in determining the success of AI tools. And then the last thing I'll talk about is the who. And there are many, many people, I think there's been a lot of discussion about the importance of multidisciplinary teams in developing and evaluating AI tools in the healthcare delivery system. And here I'm going to take this on from the focus of nurses. And this is an article that we put out a couple of months ago on our website. But it really focuses on the involvement of nurses into AI integration across University of California Health. I'll start with the first point, which is that the nurses recognize that these tools are meant to augment rather than replace their clinical judgment. But they have many, to Trishan's point in his keynote, administrative burdens that these tools can make a material difference in. And the article talks about two, for example. One is the ability to automate the prioritization of tasks in a stack, such that it reduces a cognitive burden in that respect. And the second is all-important time. So the second example involves putting information into the EHR. And the article notes that in a 12-hour shift, more than 2 hours of nurses' time might be spent on actually doing this kind of documentation. So automation tools that materially help reduce this make a significant difference, not only in the lives of our nurses in giving them time back, but also increasing the amount of time that they spend at the bedside of their patients. Critically, the way to do this, the who in the story of the why and the how, is that they are involved across the University of California Health in both the coming up of ideas and then also the assessment of how those ideas will be implemented and whether or not they'll be successful. And that has proved to be very helpful. Many of the ideas that come in actually come from nurses, and then they are also involved in every step of the way in evaluation. So things are not implemented that they do not think will work. And then I'll end with this point, and I think this is really one of the common themes of this conference, that AI is becoming essential in daily workflows. And so the thought is that as the capabilities grow, and as the risks evolve, and as we move from a world of machine learning to a world of agentic, where we want to take the benefits of all the different types and utilize them in a best way, when we look back upon this period, we will probably think to ourselves, I don't know how we ever did it without some of these tools. And to do it with governance in place, I think will make the process much more effective and much more trustworthy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cora. Very powerful delivery, especially, well, I have two take-home messages from what Cora has mentioned. The first powerful message that I heard is actually what she ended off with on the nurses, that nurses are in fact at the forefront of deciding what type of AI would be relevant. And I know there are chief nurses amongst you, as well as nurses participating. So very useful message, and perhaps the chief executive officers of hospitals should bear that in mind when you're thinking about how AI can be used to augment, not replace, some of the operations that's happening in hospitals. That's the very powerful message. The second message was what she started with, what Cora started with, around governance and guardrails. Because all of us working in the medical fraternity, we know there's very important issues around accountability, liability, safety performance, safety, quality, value these days. How do we integrate AI into this space where there are issues around accountability and liability? So many of you may have questions like me. So later on, we will flash the QR code as you could submit questions. So as you are hearing, please think about the questions that you would like to pose to our panelists and submit them. But on this issue around governance, guardrails, I'm pleased to introduce the next speaker, Ricardo, who is the Chief Executive Officer of HealthAI, which is an international think tank and thought leader in the area of how technology and AI is used in healthcare, in public health, and also, I understand, in global health as well. So Ricardo, over to you.
Thank you. So, good morning. Good morning?
Yeah.
Thank you. I was needing that. I have to say, I'm so happy to be here in Singapore because being the CEO of the Global Agency for Responsible AI in Health, HealthAI, and we're a nonprofit based out of Geneva, but traveling around the world, every time I'm somewhere, somebody asks me, what's the best country in the world? You are always top of the list. And these last 2 days, honestly, these last 2 days have shown me the power of innovation. As a physician, I know how hard it is to do the day-to-day work. And you guys find the time to dedicate your work to develop technologies to serve the people. The innovators that we're seeing here, the projects that are being presented here at this conference, all of you really deserve a round of applause for the work you're doing. So I've had the privilege of traveling, as I said, speaking with governments. We mainly work with governments, but with other stakeholders from patient organizations that are critically important because at the end of the day, we're here to serve the citizens and patients. And many people come up to us and say, we want to use artificial intelligence. And so the first thing I like to ask is why? Why do you want to use AI? The most common response I get is, it's because my boss is telling me I have to use AI, and so I have to find a way to respond to that. That is not a great answer, I must say. We need to be intentional. What Minister Ong said yesterday in the opening ceremony is critically important. Technology serves the strategy, not the other way around. We have to know where we want to go. And we can use AI to help us define that path. But we as humans have to be the leaders. We have to define what is the strategy, what is the outcome we want to achieve, and technology will be the accelerator to get us there. And when it comes to healthcare, we're in trouble. We need to fix many of the fundamental problems that we have within our broken, disease-driven models across the globe. And I'm Catholic, and so as Catholics, we have commandments that tell us what not to do. But here I want to share 5 commandments of what you should do in healthcare management. And so the thing is, if you are not doing one of these 5 things, if you're managing a health system, you should ask yourself, what am I doing? And so the first thing, and they're pretty simple. If you are dealing with a preventable disease, you need to prevent it. If you're dealing with a curable disease, you need to cure it. If it's neither one or the other, at least manage disease properly. And if you're dealing with end-of-life care or chronic pain or so forth, making sure you're minimizing suffering and malaise and bringing compassion and empathy. And if you're not doing any of that, at least in achieving the outcomes you're achieving with lower costs, so better efficiency. The thing is, 20 to 40% of all expense in healthcare globally is being used on things that contribute 0 to health outcomes. $3 trillion yearly are being wasted in things that do not contribute to improving the lives of people like Candy. And that needs to make us think, because we're always complaining we don't have enough money. But there's tons of money we are wasting in health systems. And so it's no surprise that we're seeing, especially among richer countries, that the cost of healthcare is rising. And we would expect, at least we're spending more money, but we're getting better health outcomes. And that's not the reality. We're seeing a consistent rise of burden of disease. And of course, money is not infinite. And so we will see unsustainable systems, which lead to the end of universal health coverage as we know it. And no political leader in the world will ever tell you that the health system is going to close. The lack of UHC, of universal health coverage, will be translated into growing waiting lists. People who have money in their pocket will always find a way to get access to care. It is the most vulnerable, those that are in most difficult situations, that will be left behind. And so if we do not fix this vicious cycle, we will see a consistent rise of inequities and poverty. So this is a call to action that we need to fix this problem. And to fix this problem, we need to understand then what actually affects our health as citizens. And the truth is, when I have a patient in front of me, I'm only looking at 10% of what really affects their health. They're clinical factors. 30% are the biological and genomic factors. 60% are exogenous factors. Where we live, the air we breathe. If we're in a low and middle income setting, do I have access to clean water and sanitation? When I reach lunchtime, am I going to eat the salad or am I going to McDonald's? These decisions define our health status. And each of these represent tons of data, terabytes of data, that it is impossible for one single human to address alone. And so that's where the power of artificial intelligence kicks in. Because for the first time in our lifetime, we have the technology to deal with these data sets that have been impossible for us to process in a way that is translatable into clinical practice. But what I'm seeing many times around the world is people are using AI to retrofit into our current way of working. And we need to use AI not to retrofit, but actually to think forwardly. How can we reimagine health systems altogether? And this is a huge challenge, because the tendency is just to continue doing business as usual, but just faster with AI. If you have an inefficient system, AI will make you very efficient at being even more inefficient. And so we have to use artificial intelligence and to reimagine, as I said. And so that means that all of us as leaders, despite the constant emergencies that health systems bring upon us, from the top minister of health to the person working on the ground, we all have to find the time to take a step back, ignore the legacy programs we have in place, and think, how could we design the system of the future? And we're seeing AI being applied across the whole value chain, from research and development to diagnostics to treatment, even to the admin boring stuff that somebody has to do on finance and frauds and so forth. And many of these technologies fall under a medical devices classification legally from a regulatory perspective. And that a medical device would include what Candy was mentioning about an insulin infusion pump that is AI-driven. But many of these technologies fall under the lower category, which is AI that is not a medical device. You know, if you're using predictive modeling for epidemiological surveillance or population health management, or even research and development to discover new vaccines and molecules. And Gen AI, as has been discussed, is bringing even more challenge to this factor of discussion, because Gen AI can either be classified as a medical device or not. HealthAI, as the global agency, works across the span, and you can read more about the global governance of AI in our landscape report, and every year we publish one. The next one will come out in December, and governance is incredibly important, as Cora has just highlighted very well in her speech. And the reason is because we're hitting a brick wall. We're seeing tons of pilots out there, but in most systems, we're not seeing AI scale at the speed at which it should, and especially when in comparison to other sectors like the financial sector. So we have these amazing technologies that improve outcomes, but they're not scaling. And so ethically, we are not serving our patients properly. We're not serving citizens properly because we're not giving them the access to this technology that can save lives. And what are the challenges that are holding us back? Well, they're multifold. Of course, the global fragmentation of regulations and governance models. The technology is just moving too fast. And if we depend on legislators, I was a member of parliament many years, we cannot count on legislators to keep up to speed. I can tell you right off the bat. We need to make sure that legislators give more power to the regulators and more resources so they can work directly with the developers, early stage development throughout the life cycle process to make sure that the technology reaches the market faster. We need to address the data management and privacy concerns, and also the issues of post-market surveillance, which I believe is the future of regulation in AI, making sure we can detect problems early on, mitigating risk and minimizing harm. And finally, health technology assessment. Billions are being used to develop AI technologies, but who's going to pay for it? Health systems are struggling to define what is the fair price. And this is something we need to fix. But ultimately, as Cora was mentioning, it's an issue of trust. If I have a headache, I take an aspirin. If my son has a fever, I'll give him a paracetamol. I don't even think twice about that. But if my mother has cancer and I use an AI clinical assistant tool to define the combined chemotherapy, I might want a second opinion. I still might not trust it completely. But we need to evolve. And why do we trust pharmaceutical products so much more than many of these AI tools? And the reason is because of decades of regulation, decades that have led us to build a system in which we can trust as humans, knowing that there are people who have, as a mission, as a life mission, the goal of achieving safe, effective tools and making sure that if something goes wrong, they detect it early on. And that's basically our mission at HealthAI, as the Global Agency for Responsible AI and Health, as I said, a nonprofit that works as a bridge between international organizations that define standards and guidelines, from WHO to ISO, UNESCO, OECD, and so forth, and the regulators on the ground. And we are in between translating those international guidelines. We don't do standards ourselves. We translate what has already been defined and help countries go down a maturity journey to be ever more effective in assessing, validating, and scaling AI technologies. And I'm so happy that yesterday, with Minister Ong, we were able to sign an agreement with the government of Singapore to become one of the first 10 pioneer countries of the global regulatory network that we are developing. And that's meaning, once again, Singapore is in the forefront. To end, just to say that we also are only able to do this if we bring in the voices of everyone. Governments, of course, but also academia, patient organizations, international organizations. And so everyone is truly invited to join our community of practice, which meets every month and will meet and convene in person at the HealthAI Global Governance Forum in Nairobi, Kenya, because we work across both high, low, and middle-income countries. And you can join us and join this fantastic team so that together we can improve health for all. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ricardo. He ended off with a sales pitch to join HealthAI as well. I'm not sure whether Eugene would be happy if some of your AI experts join Ricardo. So, Ricardo gave us 5 words: prevent, cure, manage, minimize, and efficiency. That could be the tagline for HealthAI.sg. But actually, if you frame it, Ricardo has framed it importantly and correctly, which is Singapore, we have the benefit of the foresight to start thinking about problems that Singapore's health system is facing and will face for the next few decades. But many governments worldwide are not. And that's why Ricardo's pitch along those elements are very critically important. The next was around this bit on AI in healthcare, which is what we have been focusing a lot about, addresses 10% of the determinants of health outcomes. There are behavioral issues, there are environmental issues, and this is really where some of you are innovators in the audience, data scientists, deep tech experts, and I think this is where it's a shout out that the relevance of AI to influence the health of populations, of communities, actually doesn't just reside within what happens in a clinical healthcare institution or setting, not just only in the hospitals, not just in the polyclinics or GPs, but also in the way that we are able to promote health, the use of AI to improve health literacy, the use of AI to monitor our behavior and sensing our environment around us in order to help us tackle other determinants of health. And I think those are very important elements. Now, if I could first invite Trishan to join us back in the room. I think we have heard today empowerment from Candy about empowering patients. We've also heard from Cora empowering nurses to guide the AI trajectory. At the same time, we heard about trust from all of our panelists today. And Ricardo has reminded us it's actually beyond healthcare, but focusing overall on health. At the heart of it, there are important issues around regulations and governance because we talk about trust. And trust only comes when people, the patients, the residents, fundamentally say, I'm happy to trust a health system that is augmented by AI or where AI actually makes some of the recommendations or some of the decisions. But with that, there may be some challenges, and in fact, I've gone through some of the questions some of you have already posed. What are the disadvantages, the dangers on the use of AI? It's easy to be rah-rah and be all enthusiastic about the bright side of a technology, but clearly there are some dangers. And perhaps, just to kick things off, I was given a question that was generated by AI, but because I'm not that intelligent, I need it to be printed out for me on a piece of paper. And it's about AI biases. And perhaps this is where I will pose to all the panelists. And it's really around biases in the data. And it's not just biases in the racial context where a lot of our Chinese, a lot of the people in Singapore, about 70%, are ethnic Chinese. But we have Malays, we have South Asian Indians in Singapore as well, about 20% and 10% respectively. We also have a significant group of non-residents in Singapore. And in fact, the group of non-residents comprise about 45% of Singapore's total number of people on this island. So clearly the representation or the representativeness of AI may be in doubt. Well, some people may query, would I trust a system where the learning data may not be reflective of my own genetic or my own racial background? But there was an extension of another question that was posed by some of you in the audience about if we now have a lot of push of AI in the public healthcare institutions, again, will it inadvertently introduce biases that we may not learn about that may then bite us when we think about this safety, when we think about this quality, efficiency? So perhaps any of the panelists, you have thoughts. Cora, in the US system, clearly this issue around representation is not new, because in California, you have one of the most diverse society in the United States. How does your system use or handle AI in this context?
No, it's a great question. It is definitely not a new issue and also not an easy issue. And I think, there was a very well-known study back in, I think, 2019 by a group of researchers out of Berkeley led by Professor Ziad Obermeyer that talked about bias that came up with respect to a particular risk algorithm, and realized that an algorithm that used sort of an inappropriate proxy, in this case cost, for medical need, didn't appropriately capture the outcomes that they wanted. And they were able to, in that case, identify the bias that was occurring and correct for it, which was great. Certainly, I think this is one of the areas where traditional machine learning, I think, can present different risks than generative AI models. And for example, Trishan, I noticed in one of your slides, you had some of the concerns in the sort of the AI 3.0 era that we're in, of multiplying biases in the models. And so I know it is something that we are going to have to continually work on, but I would love to hear your thoughts about what mitigation measures might be possible in the new land that we are in.
Yeah, thanks, Cora. I hope you all can hear me. Nice to see you again, Cora. Nice to meet you all, everyone. Okay, yeah. So look, I agree with the setup here. What Cora's describing is this set of biases that were described in Ziad Obermeyer's paper. That was looking at the prediction of risk in this kind of AI 2.0 paradigm. So there was some data about a group of patients and their outcomes and the antecedents of those outcomes, and then a model was trained to predict the outcomes. Given the antecedents, and therefore, like, this prediction model was then rolled out across the US. The problem was, of course, that it basically underestimates the risk in African American populations who consume healthcare less. So therefore show up less on the, have worse outcomes, but have lower utilization that leads to those outcomes. Now that is a classic AI 2.0 problem. The bias in the data is reflected in the algorithms. Now the question that Cora is asking is, and I'm restating it because it's a difficult one to answer, so I'm kind of buying myself some time here. But in generative models, it's much harder because we have like large foundation models that have a broad exposure to a lot of data from the internet. Now, we don't necessarily know what biases are inherent in that data, but we do know that a lot of it is produced by people, the vast majority, and therefore all the social biases that exist will also be present in the data as well. But it gets even more tricky, and you can kind of do this experiment yourself anytime. If you use any of the foundation models and you put the same input into them a sequential number of times, if one has the time and the interest of doing that, you will necessarily get different answers. And the reason for that is twofold. One is the model has a random component in it, which makes it seem creative. Two is after the model produces an output, there's another set of filtering steps that determines what you actually see. So this issue of bias that Cora is asking about, which is absolutely correct, is much more tricky, and I would say fundamentally impossible to figure out in a general way for the current foundation models. And that is a deep challenge for regulators. Like, I don't think you're going to get around it. There isn't this paradigm of using like transformer-based models with internet scale data to produce these foundation models with huge general capabilities. There isn't an obvious way of seeing like, well, if we have this individual piece of data here, or we don't have it, it's going to produce a more or less biased result. It's going to have to be about controls of the output after it's generated. And the interesting question to ask there is that, like, if you're looking at bias from a statistical sense, that's really the wrong lens here. What this is about is really values. Are the outputs of the model consistent with the values of the society that it's in, right? And so that is basically, as Candy said beautifully, like that is like, that's a question of involving patients, involving people who are the end beneficiaries, end users of these technologies, particularly people who could be most harmed, in trying to figure out what set of controls we need of the for the outputs of the models. But I don't think it's fundamentally possible to change the pre-training or the test time actions of the model. And no one has proven that that can be done anyway, even if it were like conceptually plausible. So yeah, that's I'm afraid there isn't a short answer to that question, but that's the setup.
Trishan, hold that thought, because
Yeah.
you're now telling us that there is indeed an inherent danger to the use of AI in certain clinical setting. And we come back to the foundational element that we have been hearing today, which is around trust. And Candy, I will invite you for your comments in a bit, but perhaps Ricardo first, because or Cora. It's because at the end of the day, we need the patients to trust the system. And Candy started off saying how there is the role of AI in empowering patients to change the way that they lead their lives. And I wanted Candy to perhaps share what made you and your group actually trust in this technology that you adopt for type 1 diabetes management. And what were the elements? Was it because someone came to you and showed that this technology is flawless, it's accurate, it's able to replace a lot of the functions and give your life back without errors? And I think that the key part is what made you trust the technology in the first place. And of course, that is a very specific rollout of AI in one area, but I think there may be some useful lessons that we can hear from what Candy and their peers have been thinking about. Candy. No, I thought Ricardo was holding on to the mic because he wanted to jump in to what Trishan has.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yes.
I thought Candy was going first, no problem. So there are many things to unpack here. So in rural Portugal, there's a hospital where they use a virtual assistant for patients when they're discharged to follow up with them. And I met an 80-plus-year-old woman who basically had only studied until 4th grade, and she had a congestive heart failure, and then she was released into the community. She was discharged from the hospital, and she started getting calls from this virtual assistant reminding her to take her meds, to do the exercises and so forth. And at her next consultation, she went to the doctor, and she said, "Before we start, I just want to tell you that the new person you've hired to call me every day is the nicest person ever." And then they told her, "You know it's a robot, right?" And she says, "I do not care, because she is just so kind." And that raises the issue, how much can we trust that virtual assistant in these long late-night conversations she's having with this 80-year-old woman, right? And that goes to the issue that Trishan was raising, because these large language models, these foundational models, have these fundamental challenges related to them. I am a strong believer that, and going back to your original question, that the future of AI and healthcare in general will determine the end of guidelines as we know them, because AI will open an era of hyper-personalization. A guideline is a generalization. It means what is a first line of treatment, what is a second line of treatment or diagnosis. It tells you how to perform, and you can try to break it down as much as you can, but in such a diverse population, how accurate is a guideline in the Singaporean context? So these kind of models make you have the opportunity to actually address those challenges, but I think that the only way to effectively do so is having very strong regulatory capacity in terms of post-market surveillance, so that when you see deviations from what should be the expected outcomes, you can act immediately, or else you will see harm at scale. That's one thing. But the other thing that I think will happen in the future is that these large language models, these foundational models, will probably not be the base of many of these clinical applications. We will see a step back from the industry, the developers, towards verticalized small language models that are hyper-specialized in their specific field of care. Because building on top of these huge models, not only does it bring climate issues from energy consumption and water consumption and so forth, but actually, if you can narrow it down, you can actually mitigate and minimize some of the risks. The other thing, and the last point I want to make, is on the incentives model. Because it goes back to what I was mentioning in my initial presentation, we need to fix the reimbursement challenge. We need to tell companies that there's a chance for them to get paid for their technology. But reimbursement is actually an opportunity for the regulators to define what is considered fundamental. Determining that a technology that is going to be deployed in Singapore, one of their prerequisites, it actually has to be prepared for the Singaporean population with its complexities and diversity, is fundamental. And aligning incentives is the only way to do that, so that you align the private interest with the public interest. And aligning incentives is hard. I'll give you an example. I was on a Zoom call the other day with a colleague here in the region, not in Singapore, and he had a phone on a swing going back and forth on his desk. And it was disturbing me, honestly. And I said, sorry, I'm going to interrupt the call. You have to tell me, why is your phone on a swing? Oh. And he told me, oh, it's because my insurance company gives me a premium if I do 10,000 steps a day. And so...
How many of you do the same with your National Step Challenge tracker? Please raise your hands. Don't be shy. Well, some people... So in Singapore, we have something similar. It's called a National Step
But in Singapore, I know you have no cheaters, right?
Now I lost the train of thoughts. I got stuck on this Singapore has no cheaters, and I was thinking, so I work with the Health Promotion Board, and we know that there are people who either tie the trackers to dogs or to the fans, and then they turn it on, and supposedly it works. Right, so I think this is an important point, and Ricardo, I will come back to you with a specific question, both to you and Trishan, and Cora, perhaps you can chime in as well. It's linked to performance and relevance, because, Ricardo, you put out a very bold call to say that it's the end of guidelines, perhaps 10, 20, 30 years in certain countries. But AI, it's not like traditional technology. Traditional medical technology, we evaluate for cost effectiveness, we evaluate for performance effectiveness, and then you do it once because the performance is fairly static. It doesn't change. But AI, we heard from Trishan's lecture earlier this morning, can change and can hallucinate. Sometimes you just don't know why it gives you a particular outcome. And so, this bit about how you monitor performance and to reaffirm the performance and relevance becomes important, because traditional medtech, you evaluate once, the system passes it, gives the medical incentives or subsidies, you roll out. But with AI, what performs today at a 90-95% efficiency may tomorrow or a year later perform drastically different because the learning data has shifted. And how would health systems need to accommodate or even regularly monitor such changes in performances? And I think that's a question that I will pose to Trishan and Ricardo and Cora, perhaps, for your thoughts. But Candy, earlier on, you mentioned your peers fundamentally trust this. And I know you have prepared some slides to show how AI actually has changed the way you operate in your day-to-day life. Maybe if you are able to call out the slides, and I will give Candy perhaps a couple of minutes to share some of the slides so we can have a sense. We are not talking about the generics now. We have a real use case in front of you about how technology is changing patients and their perception of their everyday life. Candy, over to you.
So to elaborate a bit more on the burden, the invisible burden of type 1 diabetes, there was a Stanford study in 2014 that found that people with type 1 diabetes make an additional 180 health-related decisions every day. And we think that the human mind makes 6,000 to 7,000 thoughts every day. You're adding on literal mental load to us. And those decisions will relate to the 42 factors that affect blood glucose. And usually to the general population, when I say this, people are kind of bowled over because they thought that diabetes is food and exercise. But if you count the number of food items in that list, they make up only 25% of the 42 factors. And these factors, of course, change in intensity and in scale as we move through different periods of our life. So from a female perspective, when the menstrual cycle starts, then your blood sugars will be hugely affected as well. And then on the flip side, when you go into pregnancy and menopause, then your hormones start to change, your blood glucose levels will start to change. So all of that is what we have to mentally take into account even before technology even existed in diabetes care. So now, I literally put in a visual representation of the thoughts that might go through someone's mind, and you can see which parts technology has helped to alleviate. So if you can move to the next slide. Oh, yeah. Okay, so there is no citation here because, thank you, these thoughts would have gone through my mind many, many times, many, many days. So even without reading exactly what I've written, you can broadly see that lifestyle-related decisions, which are the text in blue, make up almost 50% of the thoughts that go through my mind. And these are only the thoughts that relate to my condition. So if we're seeing that there is quite a mix between lifestyle and clinical advice-related things that we had to learn when we were first diagnosed, then what does this mean for the potential of technology to help us in at least handling the lifestyle-related decisions? And I want to elaborate a bit more on if you have ever done up a care plan or are working with people with diabetes, you will know some of the things that prevent them from controlling their diet or why they don't want to test their glucose level. They will come to you in their appointment and they'll say, oh yeah, my HbA1c is like 8. And then, oh, did you test? Oh no, I forgot today. I went out with my friend. And as a healthcare professional, you might be thinking, well then why don't you just do it? You know how to do it. It takes me a few seconds. You maybe can't fully imagine why this person just doesn't want to do it. This is the reason why they don't do it, right? When you see it in chronological order. So I talked about young kids being diagnosed. Oops. And this is what it looks like from a parent taking care of a child. Obviously, the clinical care part is handled more by the parent, and then the child takes on some of the lifestyle decisions. But sometimes it's the child's lifestyle decisions that end up affecting their glucose levels too. So if I were to summarize, there are 3 main domains that matter to us in terms of mental load. It's the mental part about managing diabetes. We're looking at, if it's not carb counting, for type 2 people, it's still going to be about some kind of food exchange somewhere. So they obviously have to learn from the dietitian some of this key knowledge. Then we have the emotional burden and we have the social burden. And you can see that for people like me, why we ended up trusting an AI insulin infusion system is because it helps us feel more normal. So when you ask a patient what do they want, maybe when they're newly diagnose, they want the knowledge first. But then for lifestyle conditions, it's all about sustaining and maintaining and building that resilience. People will falter across their life stages. So if we can use AI to help them build up that long-term resilience, then why not? Because in the end, we all still want to have as normal lives as people without diabetes. And an analogy that I like to use is that you can imagine yourselves, as long as you don't have type 1 diabetes, you're like an automatic car. You're going around, you're zooming around, you're doing your own thing. Then people with type 2 diabetes, they're like semi-automatic cars. They're functioning in some ways and then just need a little bit of help. And then for people like me, we're the fully manual cars. And you can see we're thinking about those 42 factors. So how can then use us as a use case, because we are already using technology to alleviate some of that. And by the way, I want to caveat as well, the technology I'm using is not replacing my healthcare team. Actually, it is there for me when my healthcare team is not able to, just because they are humans themselves and they have work schedules, they have appointments, and they don't check WhatsApp as fast. It's as simple as that. So hyper-personalization is what Ricardo said. This is the direct application of it. And you can work incentives into it, you can work reimbursement systems into it. Part of the reason why people in Singapore also find it hard to use this exact system is because the cost is extremely high. We have no reimbursement for a system that actually helps us feel more normal and helps us manage the condition better.
And if I could now come back to the question that I posed, but actually to link it up with a question that the audience has posed as well. So maybe I could start off with Trishan around this hallucination impact. How do we safeguard against hallucinating performances from AI, and from a government and regulatory framework perspective? What are the guardrails, borrowing the word that Cora used, what are the guardrails we need to put in place to make sure that we are able to do this and be accepted and trusted by the people, by the patients? Trishan, over to you, and then followed by Ricardo.
All right. Okay. So there's a bunch of there's a lot of questions in that, right? That isn't just one question. So let's just kind of look at each one of the areas here. So I think the first thing is that you have essentially kind of two issues that you're bringing up, YY, here with the model. So the first thing is this tendency to kind of make things up. Some people call it hallucination. Confabulation is another term. And it is really a feature of the way the models are architected. It isn't a bug. Like it's not because there's some bit isn't functioning correctly. And without this capability, you also wouldn't get things that feel kind of natural or creative. And the balance generally seems to be that people prefer those kind of responses from the model. So therefore you incur some cost of basically making things up. Now, of course, when you're just making up, I don't know, like a rap in the style of like Lee Kuan Yew talking about the origin of Singapore, that may be okay because there isn't really a ground truth to that. But or maybe there was, and he was a secret rapper. I don't know. But in medical applications, that obviously poses a bunch of concerns, right? So I think the first thing is there are like post hoc controls. So you could have the outputs of the models are an input into a checking model. So it's kind of an actor-critic approach. And lots of people have employed that successfully. There are obviously some computational costs, but there are technical fixes to that. And there are ways that you can improve the performance of the model by the optimization of data. So I think technically speaking, that can be taken care of. But I don't think that's the actual question that you're asking. I think the question that I want you all to consider here is that we have to be really clear about what the standard is here, right? Because like any of these approaches, and I can suggest some and other people suggest some, are not going to be 100%. There's going to be some failure rate. And of course, just obvious logic is that at massive scale, things that are extremely rare are a statistical certainty, right? Like at the kind of scale that something will be operating across the health system. So is that okay? And like here's what I would ask you to consider, that here in the US, every day there's like around 300 people die in car crashes. So that's basically roughly a jumbo jet falling out of the sky every single day. Now, if that actually happened, if a jumbo jet fell out of the sky every single day, then no one would be flying. But because this is the base rate and it's massively distributed, we just all accept it as normal. And the analogy, of course, is that, like, if you look at self-driving cars, if there's 300 people dying every day, but if one self-driving car crashes, obviously it's a story, it sticks in everyone's mind, but it's orders of magnitude safer than humans driving. But we don't have a general mandate on self-driving cars. So this trust issue is incredibly complex. There's a bunch of human biases here. Technically speaking, this base rate neglect. And actually, if you look at the healthcare system, unfortunately, Candy, I have to say, I'm sure it's better in Singapore, but certainly I would be, the standard is hugely variable. As a patient, you're kind of putting, the reason trust is so important is because actually in many cases, you're not really able to judge the provider a priori to like them to receiving care. And when you are receiving care, you're not really in a position to usually seek other care, certainly not without any difficulty. So the standard of care at the moment is hugely variable. There's huge concerns with safety and quality, and it's very high cost. So like, what is the comparison standard we're holding AI to? We could decide as society it's perfection, and we can have these kind of discussions, and those could be the things that we look at before we do any AI. Or it could be, let's look at the system as is and see if we can do marginally better and at something that's more responsive to patients' needs and costs. But ultimately, like, there are technical considerations on both sides, but it's a decision that requires leadership. And so therefore, I kind of go back to my kind of soapbox from before. It's very important that patients are educated, but also leaders of healthcare organizations are conversant in these technologies and can kind of pose and figure out a workable answer to these questions.
Before I hand the mic over to Ricardo, I just want to give Cora a heads up. I'm going to give you a difficult question, which is the second part of this question. Please don't take away the question yet. Can I have the question back? Because the second part would be relevant for Cora, because the University of California Health, you have multiple healthcare institutions that's offering care. And this bit about fragmentation, I would like to pose that to you, as well as the element of what happens if there is a misdiagnosis or there's an error that is AI-driven. Who is liable and accountable? Because I take Trishan's point, but at the same time, there is an important aspect when we work in clinical care, which is medical accountability and liability. When there's an error, someone would be accountable. But if the error is guided because of AI, let me say this again. If the error is produced because of the guidance that AI provided, then who would fundamentally be liable?
Let's turn our focus back. I can't even speak now, I'm too obsessed with the lyrics. Focus back to home ground. We're going to take a look at how different aspects of healthcare, from leadership to data, from our fundamental learning needs to mindset shift, need to be rewired for the AI era. So the next panel will look at how we can unlearn to relearn, as well as redesign healthcare's DNA, making not just systemic, but also cultural changes. So to guide us through this transformation journey, we're delighted to welcome Professor Jennifer Cleland, a member of the HEAL Advisory Think Tank and the President's Chair in Medical Education at Lee Kong Chieng School of Medicine. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you. A warmer welcome. Stop doing your lyrics now.
All the four panelists here as well. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
All right, please take a seat.
So, I think, Jennifer, we will allow you to introduce your panel. We have Sandy Minyang, Haslina Jason, who will share more on their credentials. Thank you.
Oh, is that mine? Is it? Okay. Oh, gosh. Thank you. So, good morning still, everyone. I have 2 iPads to maneuver and a piece of paper, so this could all go horribly wrong. I'm aware that we are running a little bit late. It's 11:20, and lunch is timed for 12:20. Now, I've lived long enough in Singapore to know that lunch is critical. So we will try to finish as near to 12:20 as possible. Our panelists are all primed to speak concisely so that we can maximize the amount of time for questions. So my first speaker is Sandy Ho, and Sandy is the Assistant Chief Operating Officer with NUH, so rival organization, rival cluster. Yeah. And she has many, many years of experience as a leader in healthcare, and she's going to share about the realities and challenges of the adoption of AI. And as our compere said, this session is very much about hands-on, examples of adopting AI, of implementing AI on the ground in Singapore. Thank you, Sandy.
Okay, just to correct it, it's actually friendly cluster. Yeah. and I'm not here to sell things about NUHS, yeah, because if not, the organizer will make sure I won't get to come into CHI the next time. So a little bit about what I do. So I'm actually the Assistant Chief Operating Officer for Plans and Strategy in NUH. But I'm also the co-chairperson for Cambridge Office of Innovation in NUH, as well as Director for Quality Improvement, as well as Executive Director for NUH Referral Laboratories. Yeah. So maybe going back, I probably need to use the AI assistant to help me to probably shorten my titles and shrink it to just one. So I meant to actually use the next couple of minutes, right, to actually just run through, quickly share about what we have been actually doing in NUH, yeah? Because I understand the majority of people in the crowd is actually with our friendly cluster. Okay, without further ado, okay, so for NUHS, right, I don't think I need to explain a lot about what we do in NUHS. But really just to perhaps share on the fact that we are actually in the process of increasing our capacity within the cluster. So if you look at it, right, NUH having like the infrastructure for already like 40 years, although of course our history dated back much longer, yeah, to the School of Medicine, which is 120 years old. We are actually on the beginning stage of redevelopment work to try to expand our capacity within NUH. The next one is actually Alexandra Hospital, our sister institution, which is already on the redevelopment road, right? Slated to be completed in 2029. And then we also will have a new institution, the Tengah General Hospital, up and coming in 2031. So all in all, if you look at it, right, with the new institution as well as then our redevelopment, we are actually increasing our capacity, meaning that we will have more beds within the cluster, which means that then there's a larger demand for healthcare workforce going forward. But I think for all the different sessions that you kind of have attended, right, you do know that we actually face with like the burning platform of aging population, shrinking population, as well as also the shortage of healthcare workers, yeah? Even in the normal time without increasing capacity, we know that it's more and more difficult to actually attract healthcare professionals joining the healthcare sector. Okay, so in NUH, helping us to move towards NUH 2030, we actually have in our strategy looking at leveraging on technology and AI, yeah? Also innovating to achieve more with limited resources. Don't get me wrong, we're not saying that, we're going to do more with less, yeah? It's really all about smarter work and then better care. And also, our strategy is actually aligned with what we have at the cluster level. So, digital as default, everyone, an innovator. Quite quickly, I will share a little bit about what we have as our AI solutions already within NUHS. Won't have time to run through the details, but if you have attended PROSNIAM previous sessions and all, you will know that we do have our LLMs rolled out since February last year. Not just one, but actually 3. So 2 internally developed, and then, of course, there's tandem with Synapse. We have also integrated then the voice-to-text into the MediVoice into Russell. And other solutions that we have is like a MedBoard, which is really medication counseling, ED summarizer, basically transforming clinical notes into medical reports. And then Elsevier Clinical Key AI, which is a recent one that we have implemented. So again, if there are technologies out there, right, it's just a call out to you to note that we do not just build our own technologies. Yeah? We do embrace new technologies, balancing the need for proprietorships versus the speed to market, yeah? Okay. Sorry, so if you want to know more about solutions, there's a QR code there. You basically can just scan the QR code, get into our e-newsletter. In there, we actually have very funny videos done up, yeah, to help people appreciate more about our solutions. So you can read more about the technology solutions there. Okay. And on building an AI-ready workforce and culture, it is not easy. Yeah, there were 5 pillars that we have took into consideration. So one is actually leadership and governance. As I've shared earlier, right, you will notice that we do have our institution strategies very clearly laid out and then aligning it with the cluster strategies. So clear strategy, building trust, where we actually have our NUHS AI governance committee form as well to review all our AI initiatives, pretty much closely referencing to the Singapore guidelines, yeah, like the MOH Agile as well as the PDPA, and then embedding leadership at all levels, which I can share a little bit more during our discussion later. Data as infrastructure is very critical. I mean, we're just lucky that someone like Prof. Nyam have thought about, building our data, right, since 2015. So, which then has allowed us to currently build our AI models on top of it, yeah? So basically, if there's interest, you can test the AI models on top of it and then push into production. Learning is the part that my Cambridge Office of Innovation is really pushing on. It's not just so much about training, yeah, but it's really equipping the staff, right? Not just knowing how to use the technology, but really appreciating what the technology can help them to do, yeah, shortening workflows, etc. Then we also then look at, hey, if we want people to come together to build solutions, right, we need to be able to provide a platform for them to do it. So we do have space for people to co-create. In fact, we are also building a new innovation hub now in NUH, which is actually slated to launch in September this year. And then culture is not something that we recognize that will change overnight, yeah? So it's really through all the different things that we do, showing the staff that technologies can help to improve work, improve the outcome of patients, yeah, to actually get them to embrace it. In fact, last year we actually did also a innovation culture survey just to set our baseline, right, on things that we need to improve on. So last but not least is really funding and measurements. So we do look at that. Also having our NUHS, AAIGC, funding what works from the pilots. Okay, just one final slide. While at the leadership level, we think a lot of things. We look through strategies, we plan the implementations and all. But when actually getting things down to the ground, simplicity is the best way to go, yeah? So we need to kind of make the informations and the things that we want to do for the staff simple for them to understand. So here in Cambridge Office of Innovation, we basically talk about key technologies, the space to innovate, as well as then the training programs for the staff. Yeah, that's all from me.
Oh. Thank you so much, Sandy. So I thought that was really fascinating that, and it picked up what our guest speaker said first thing this morning, that when we integrate technology and AI, it should be to serve strategy, not just for the sake of it. And Sandy highlighted the many enablers that are necessary to underpin AI adoption, from leadership to infrastructure, to equipping staff with the knowledge and skills, to seeing the benefits. Because if we don't see the benefits, people are not going to adopt AI. And that finishing on that really nice note of the mindset of everybody an innovator. So thank you, Sandy. I'm now going to hand over to Minyang, Dr. Chow Minyang, who is a colleague and a friend of mine from Tang Tok Seng Hospital and from LKCMedicine. And Minyang is going to share his perspective on how learning must and has changed for AI from an education angle. Thanks, Minyang.
Thanks, Prof. Cleland. It's a real privilege to be with you today to share with you what NHG Health Group Clinical Education has done in partnership with LKCMedicine. We believe that the future of education is not just AI-enabled, but AI-enhanced. At NHG Group Clinical Education, we believe in the marriage of humanistic medicine as well as AI-enabled education. This is a dyad that cannot be separated. Without the efficiencies of AI, the training of humanistic medicine may not flourish. But without humanistic medicine, AI will go unchecked, unregulated, and dangerous. And so our Group Chief Education Officer, Prof. Michelle Zhong, has charted for us the next path in the next 10 years as humane, putting together both humanistic medicine as well as AI in education. In NHG education, we've got various tiers in which we hope our educators will aspire to. We hope that all our educators will be confident AI end users. Some of us will go into becoming AI solutions architects. Some of us will use big data, machine learning, deep learning to identify trends in learning. Many of us take on leadership positions, and as leaders, we need to know when to use AI, but more importantly also, know when not to use AI. There is a real need for AI in education because it, number one, increases educator effectiveness, and number two, and more importantly, it has the potential to accelerate student learning. Just a simple example from the learning pyramid of Edgar Dale. We know that when a lecture is given to you, like right now, you're only going to remember 5% of what is given to you. However, if you engage in active discussions and you practice by doing, you teach others what you have learned, you gain much more and you retain much more. And AI can help us move from passive learning methods to active learning methods. And this move is tough by ourselves as educators, but with AI's assistance, we can do that. We have developed a platform called AIM.education in NHG, and this gives our educators and our learners tools which are AI-enabled and AI-enhanced. For the CFOs here, this is a slide that will entertain you tremendously. Just in our first month of launch, our educators wrote 444 MCQs with AI assistance. They developed 78 Vivas and OSCEs and 52 comms scenarios. It went through 208 rounds of sparring with my learners on how to come up with a good differential diagnosis. So if you are tickled by the numbers, we saved 694 man-hours, 4.5 FTEs in 1 month, with an expenditure of only 12 Singapore dollars, US $9. And so this massive cost savings will enable our educators to drink more coffee and also to spend more time with their learners, developing skills that AI can't imbue in them, like good communication skills, patient-centeredness, and empathy. At NHG College, we welcome you to join our courses in AI. These are open to everyone throughout the nation. I believe that educators of tomorrow will not be just adopting current solutions, but have the capability of creating their own solutions. And we published this recently in actually Prof. Cleland's journal, how can we, as educators, take on the software engineering role to design custom simulations, low cost, no cost, disposable apps for one-time purposes, just for our learners to use. An example, have you ever tried to teach your learners how to use insulin? It's very difficult. Even if an 8-hour lecture, you can't teach your learners how to use insulin. But we built this from scratch, with no code at all. And now our learners just log into the platform, pick Epidra, Glulicin, Glargine, and they can see the sugar trends immediately change in front of their eyes. This real-time active learning simulation allows them to experience rather than be taught. From attending a lecture to experimenting on the ground, they get and retain much more. Good education software does not come from, good education software ideas do not come from AI alone. It comes from good pedagogy, and that's where humans take the center stage. We are the ones who set good human pedagogy in learning, and we infuse our apps with tons of good pedagogy, so that when AI takes over, AI knows how to best accelerate learning. Thanks to the help of CHI, and a big shout out to Ms. Lim Xiaowei, as well as Ms. Elizabeth Pan, we managed to spend $18,000 with students from SUTD to build a patient-fronting avatar to present to President of Singapore. This avatar helps our learners interact and try out communication skills which would be dangerous in a real clinical setting, such as breaking bad news, such as admitting a medical error. These topics can be very, very safely practiced in a safe environment, and our students really gain much from this interaction. We also believe that in the future, if we get things right, educators can use AI and machine learning to crunch big data to glean deeper insights. And we have started this work with LKCMedicine. We want to see whether we can predict learners who don't do too well in the future, but not to discriminate against them, but to help them at an earlier stage. When we realize that our learners will falter in the future, we want to step in earlier to help them. And just to end off, our journey is education. Our destination is fit for purpose healthcare professionals who practice with the principles of humanistic medicine. AI is neither the journey nor the destination. It is just a vehicle to get there. But boy, is it a sexy vehicle. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minyang. Sorry, I'm just slightly bemused by AI being sexy, but I'll have to kind of think a bit more about that. But that was really interesting in terms of identifying the different roles and relationships that people may have with AI in education. We're not all the same. People will develop their relationships and decide what they're comfortable with. And there was lots of parallels there between healthcare and education, that AI can help us do routine things more efficiently to free up our time, not to have more coffee, but to think about the bigger issues in education, to engage with the bigger thinking. And everything needs to be based on solid pedagogy and theory. So our third speaker, Haslina, is from the Singapore National Eye Centre, and she's going to be sharing her experience of being part of the team to roll out AI initiatives in diabetic retinopathy. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Hey, good morning, everyone. So I'm Haslina. I'm from the other friendly cluster, Singapore National Eye Centre. So I'm here being asked by Prof. Wong to share our journey and how we actually managed to integrate AI in our diabetic eye screening. And I would say that it has been a long road, or it had been a long road, or still is a long road. So for those innovators out there, please don't give up. There is light at the end of the tunnel, okay? So I take myself as an example. But of course, before I start this talk, I'd like to thank Prof. Wong Hon Tim for his visionary leadership as one of the steering committee members to get it started. And without his hammers and knocks on the hammers on the table, it probably wouldn't happen. So thanks, Prof. Okay, so I start. Maybe I'll take you back a little bit behind in history, when it all started. So it started when this man, if you can see him, he's actually the Google CEO. He actually announced in one of the conferences that I have a new software that can do detection of diabetic retinopathy. And that created a very big buzz in the medical community. So they showed that they had almost perfect marks in terms of determining whether there's DR in the images. And I felt that, wow, is this going to take my job one day? Because my background is I'm actually a trained health professional. My expertise is looking at retina images, and for the past 10 years, but I think for the past few years, I've been looking at more of spreadsheets and Word documents because now I'm a deputy director, no choice. So when they actually did this, I was like, wow, this could actually change how I do things. Do I need to have a second career? And it made me more even anxious when they actually be able to implement in Thailand and India with very good marks. If you know what's AUC, so it actually means mainly accuracy. But if you actually read the paper, it didn't really discuss about the challenges they had when they implemented that in Thailand and India. Actually, Google developed their DR software based on open source data sets like Kaggle and Messidor, they didn't have data sets, that were actually catered to the population. And I think that has been discussed in prior panels about how important was it to have data to be validated, to have your software be validated in the local population. So when we tried to say, what can we do differently? And that's where Singapore comes in. So I'm proud to say that I'm part of the team that actually developed Haslina, Singapore Eye Lesion Analyzer. We are second, I would say, in the world. And we managed to do this within a Singapore context. What do I mean by that? When we developed this in Singapore using Singapore population images done for our Singapore diabetic screening program. So homegrown in Singapore. And we did get quite fantastic results of 93.6 accuracy. With Haslina Plus, our intention was very clear. It was never to remove the graders from the loop, but it was meant to be an AI-assisted tool. And how did we do that? So currently, traditionally, we do have readers like myself who actually read through thousands and thousands of images. So in Singapore, we have 2 reading centers, Tan Tock Seng as well as SNEC, where between the both of us, we read about 100 to 120,000 images a year. And you can know that with the number of diabetics, it's set to grow. Therefore, a fully human model is not sustainable. So how do we deploy our Haslina Plus? Again, it's never meant to remove the grader from the loop. We are currently using our AI software to be able to provide a preliminary assessment, which cuts down the reader's time in terms of doing the report. But we won't stop there. Currently, we are actually trying to finish up our analysis where we want Haslina Plus to be part of an active loop, confirming normal cases only and sending the results back to the polyclinic within minutes. Now, what's the benefit for me as a reader or my colleagues who are readers? It actually frees us our time in order to be able to focus on more of the complex cases that need our attention. And by reducing the number of normals that we need, and it's actually half of our workload, we only need to read about 50% of the cases that come in. So what does it mean also for us in terms of our job? I think I see it positively that we get upskilled in terms of being able to interpret complex cases. As we are also non-physician technicians or optometrists, we can always get redesigned and redeployed into providing direct patient care. And I feel that that is also beneficial for us. So this slide, I think, again, another CFO slide, because yesterday we were talking all about CFOs, and which I thought was very important because we needed to show that our model works and it is cost-effective for Singapore. So this model actually shows that it is $77 if we only adopted a manual process, that we only have readers in the loop. But when we looked at a semi-AI, which we were actually doing right now, where we have the AI and the human in the loop, it actually costs net savings of 20%. Check for the CFO. So it is a good sign. But I think we went even further and we asked ourselves, would it fully benefit or cost-effective for us to go fully AI? And when we did the analysis, and we found that actually not really. Indeed, it is cheaper than a fully manual model, but it is not cheaper than a semi-AI model. And the reason why, as you know, AI are very sensitive, so it can cause a bit of false positive that may cost to the healthcare system. So I'd like to wrap up my sharing today. So I think one of the 3 things that I would like to summarize in terms of how we managed to implement this in our screening program. Number 1, as Min Ong said, we had a very clear strategy. We wanted it to assist our readers, not replace them. We had a very simplified IT infrastructure with a simple workflow, with a clear clinical standard pathway, etc. We also did our changes not in a disruptive manner, because people don't like change. I don't like change. But we made it in a way that in the workflow, it's seamless. As you know, as healthcare workers, anything that takes additional clicks, you're not going to use it, right? So we made it as much as seamless as possible that the grader does not need to do anything more. And the impact of change is we transform our readers. We managed to tell our readers, okay, we need to upskill you, you need to do maybe job redesign, but it's okay. It doesn't mean that you lose your jobs, but now you focus on what's important. And when you put the people at the heart of what you do, hint, hint, SingHealth tagline, you actually have a lot of traction. When people see the benefit, that's where the real transformation takes place. Thank you.
Thanks, Haslina. That was really interesting. And one of my areas of research is looking at the complexity of change. And what I really liked about your presentation, Haslina, was that you can't just look at the outcome. You have to look at the process. And by comparing those kind of three ways of doing things, three processes, you were able to identify the most effective rather than just looking at the end point. So really great. So our last speaker is Jason. So Jason is not from a healthcare cluster. He is from Singapore Tech Centre, and he will share about how the larger industries in healthcare, industries outside the public healthcare space, in particular the pharmaceutical sector, has changed to adopt AI in its processes. Over to you, Jason.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. My name is Jason. I'm from MSD. MSD is a global pharmaceutical company, and we love to be friends with all the healthcare clusters. I work in the AI Center of Excellence, and actually we have a large technology center here in Singapore. My MD is actually sitting there, if you want to quickly wave your hand in case anyone wants to talk to him more, as well as our head of partnerships. So my angle is really around not so much a use case, but how we think about AI and change in the context of large AI programs. So I just have 3 ideas which I'll kind of go through, kind of like 2 minutes each if I can manage. Firstly is how we direct our AI attention. How do we think about use cases and apply it in the right way? Second is really about people, and maybe I'll share a quick parable about how we can frame our thinking about the people aspects of AI. And finally, I'll talk about governance. For myself, I actually lead the global AI governance and research functions. And so I think for the previous panel, many of the questions are very much close to my heart and very part of my day job. So let's get into it. Maybe I'll start with this tweet. Some of you might have seen it. It talks about this person who says that, the problem of AI is that it is doing my art and my writing when I want it to do my laundry and dishes, right? And I think, it's kind of funny on the surface, but also not so funny and a bit dark when you think about it. And it speaks to the idea that we need to really select our use cases very thoughtfully and not just apply AI to everything it can do. Just because it can do something doesn't mean we should apply it in that way. So I'm trying to bring this back to our use cases. There's a bunch of dot points on this slide, and I won't drain the slide, but I just want to bring your attention to the text I put in bold. The first one is in bold, in green, is we need these use cases to be both top-down and bottom-up. As the previous speaker has shared, AI is expensive, so we do need some sort of alignment to strategy and the top-down. At the same time, I think all of us have that experience where some COE, some senior person far, far away, applies an AI project because they think it's a good idea to my space. And we call it nice from far, but far from nice, because they don't know the realities of our local context. So it also needs to be bottom up. The second thing is, I think the previous panel talked about fragmentation. And I think it's very tempting to think of AI projects in isolation, where every use case, do I fund it? Yes, no, yes, no. Then it becomes a new project. I think that's often not the case. If you think about popular applications like ChatGPT, ChatGPT is a summarizer, a code generator, an authoring tool, integrated image generation, and so many things all in one. So in order to prevent multiple products who are doing the same thing, we do need joint product planning, and not every use case is a standalone project. A lot of them are just product features. Finally, on the right-hand side, and this is kind of what addresses the previous point on AI and laundry and dishes. If you think about a typical prioritization process, the classical thing is, you have some 2x2 matrix, and you have, high value, high visibility, low risk, amazing, top right-hand quadrant. Let me do that one. I would like to suggest one more element, which is the human element. We should target work that has low desirability and low meaning. We don't want to take away the work that gives us, what motivates us to go to work every day. And I think this is a theme that has been repeated across multiple sessions. The next one, I want to share a couple of pictures, and this is actually not an AI-generated picture. It's a really fit guy. So in this parable, we have two farmers. The first farmer, in one season, uses manual tools and brings like 1 bushel of crops. The second farmer rides a tractor and in the same season has 5 bushels of crops. And from someone who is doing prioritization, business case, CFO, amazing. But the thing is, in moving to the tractor and not doing the manual tool, we have the productivity, but the worker is changed in a different way. The second worker may not be as fit as the first worker. The skills are being changed because the work doesn't just affect the work also affects the worker. Beyond that, tractors also do not exist in a vacuum. Whole farming ecosystems spend decades to transform due to mechanization and industrialization. We have you have repair sheds, you have petrol, you have the whole tractor industry booming because of that. And so the third thing is that today we think of the immediate first order effects of AI, but we also need to think about how AI affects the broad ecosystem, which is I think in summary, we need to think about the work, the worker, and the worldview in order to fully capture change management for AI systems. My last one is basically, I think, a snapshot of the way that I think about AI governance. And the word governance is a very, very overloaded term. You talk to a lawyer, it means one thing. You talk to a cybersecurity person, it means another thing. Talk to a data scientist, it means a different thing. And within our company, we have, I think, literally 8 functions with literally 20 or 30 teams working on AI governance. But over the years, I bucket them into these 3 areas. Either they are from concern with legal risks and regulatory issues, FDA, EMA, HSA, and so on. Second, you are in the company. You work for something like GRC. I'm a policy person, a risk person, a compliance person. Or finally, you are, inverted commas, a technical person who is looking at data science, safety, security, cybersecurity, and so on. I call them the 3 Ps. Are you a prosecutor? Are you a policeman? Or are you a practitioner? And the problem is this. The problem is I have a background in data science, and many people, I've been thinking about this for many years, but I'm not very influential. So just because I write a paper, I write a little paper because my model, headquarters does not always listen to me. However, when the EU AI Act rolls on or any other regulation rolls on, I want to avoid a big fine. So I need to comply with legal risks. So again, I think the issue we have in AI governance is often that the influence is on the left, the power is on the left, but the knowledge is on the right. And I think the previous panel put it very well, where regulation always lags the frontier of technology by a few years. So in order to get good AI governance, we can't just reduce ourselves to legal risks, but we need to do more than what's required by law in order to really manage what is ethical and other risks of AI. I'll close with this thought. I think for us working in areas that affect patients and people and so on, there is a narrative by AI companies that says that AI companies, I am an unnamed big AI company that has $1 billion funding. I can train my large language models. The whole world should listen to me because I'm AI. I know what I'm doing. I want to leave you with the thought that AI governance has 2 words, AI and governance. And excellence in AI governance doesn't need to come from the first word. It can also come from industries that are well-tuned to the regulatory realities of the world, and I think healthcare is one of them. So excellence from AI governance can come from groups just like ours as well, and I encourage all of us to kind of embrace that future. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason. That was really thoughtful in terms of thinking what are the implications for our workforce if we change tasks, if we change the nature of tasks, and indeed somebody had asked that question, so we may come back to it later. However, our first question was generated by AI. So I'll stick to the script and start with this question. So looking at the AI generated this on the basis of the contents of the talks. There's often a disconnect between AI solutions developed at the leadership level and the practical realities of implementation on the ground. So how do we bridge this gap between AI ambition and AI reality in healthcare, particularly when dealing with lots of resistant staff, AI's words, not mine, legacy systems and resource constraints. So it's quite difficult to know who to start with that, because I think all the panel will be able to speak to it. So I think we can do it in order. So Sandy, starting with you.
Okay, I'll get to start first. So I do think often at times, I think we underestimate how receptive our staff can be, pertaining to new technologies. Let me put it this way. If we have successfully implemented NGMR Epic, there is no technology that we cannot take in. Yeah. So it's just that, of course, with a large system, right, like NGMR Epic, right, it takes months, or even years, right, for us to actually conceptualize, the implementation, put together resources, and then the timeline to actually push through the implementation. Whereas for AI technologies, right, things are changing really fast, How do we then, be more agile in selecting the right tools, for our staff to use, and also then be able to equip them with the right knowledge of using the solutions, I think that's more the crux of the issue. Pertaining to legacy system, we're not saying that we're going to change and overhaul the system overnight with new AI technologies. Already being shared in various conferences, right? We currently at this phase now is really looking at AI being an enabler. It's not going to replace a doctor, diagnosing patients. It's just going to help, perhaps, the doctor simplifying the workflow, also for administrator to actually having to reduce certain mundane tasks, and then do something really more valuable. Touching on resource constraint, as I've shared earlier, we do know that for new technologies, right, it requires a lot of investment. So we do ring-fence a certain innovation fund, whether it's at the institution level or at the cluster level. In fact, during last year, where really at the height of pushing AI solutions, right, we pretty much let the ground, trying to work through solutions by themselves. We call it really 1,000 flowers bloom, right, 百花齐放, And then suddenly it bloomed to a stage where we then decided to do an AI audit and realized that there were 164 initiatives going on across the cluster. That's the time where we then think, okay, there are pockets of initiatives going on. That's good because there will be new ideas generated, right? Up to a point where the solution is, becoming more mature, it will require a lot more investment. So that's the reason why we then form a committee, AI governance. We call it AI governance committee, but effectively it's really looking at all the AI solutions and see which one makes sense for us to actually fund it further, right? Of course, there's internal funding, there's also external funding. We just need to make sure that the staff is actually equipped with the knowledge that if they have a good ideas, they test it already and they need additional support, there are avenues for them to come to. And within NUH, it's basically the Cambridge Office of Innovation. Yeah.
Thank you. Minyang.
I think here we're dealing with gaps. The big gap is the AI ambition, and what we have on the ground, which is reality. And let me talk about resistant staff first. I think there are many people that we have to convince, and it's part of change management. However, I think the benefit of AI, especially in education, the efficiencies of AI in many, many areas brings about very concrete benefits. Just bring the educators who are painstakingly setting MCQs in the office to the group sitting in Starbucks. I think that's one of those kind of ways that we can try to influence just by human nature alone. But jokes aside, I think resource constraint is something that I want to speak about just briefly. I think we all know that AI solutions are expensive. However, if you're just using AI by itself, just vanilla AI by itself, a generative AI, for example, 10 million words are generated, $12. However, if you put this in the sandbox, if you put this in the enterprise level environment with high security, the cost of it balloons 100, 200, 1,000 times. There are many, many barriers to this. There are many mouths to feed. There are many middlemen in which costs balloons up. How are we able to go around this cost constraint or to find more efficient ways to use AI and implement it in an easier fashion? Those are my questions, and I don't have an answer to them, but it's for something for us to chew on. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Wow, I think those are very fantastic answers. Nothing much for me to add, but maybe from my perspective as a more of a grounds operations person, I feel that the gap between AI ambition and AI reality, I think we cannot oversell AI. AI is not going to solve all our problems. And I think when we implemented from our screening program, we are very honest what the AI is going to do and what we expect the human will do after we implement AI. I think honesty builds trust. And I think a lot of people, a lot of staff are always scared that they get replaced, etc. So I think when you build that trust, you get less resistance. I wouldn't say none, we do still have, but at least it gets you moving and you don't get stuck. And in terms of legacy systems, as you know, SingHealth is going on a journey to Epic. Everything is frozen. Nothing moves, right? But when you think about it, you need to be creative. So as you know, NoteBuddy, right? I think some of you use NoteBuddy in SingHealth, right? It's actually a standalone. You can use it anywhere else, regardless of which EMR you use, right? So I think we need to think out of the box. So SingHealth, this is where the adoption that we are using. So in my other hat, I actually am innovation. I do innovation and transformation in National Eye Center as well. We try to move around the legacy systems. We try to be creative, and I would say that it is not easy, but you just have to, right? Because there's a need. In terms of resource constraints, I think this is healthcare all over. There's never enough people, never enough money, never enough anything, right? Never enough beds, right? But I feel that constraints aside, you must ask yourself, what is it that is your vision? What's your vision that you want the AI to do? And how it can help you, not replace you, but help you. So I think you need to go on the lines and, like, for example, as I alluded to earlier, have a clear strategy of how you're going to implement it on the ground. Thank you.
I think I just want to share like two thoughts quickly. The first one actually comes from a bit random, but it comes from a book that I read. It's by Thomas Friedman. Thank You for Being Late. And in his book, he talks about the difference between physical technologies and social technologies. AI is like a physical technology. It's like computer programs and so on. And I think the point he makes is that people take a lot longer for social technology to change relative to physical technology. So today we are grappling with all these new releases of AI systems, GenAI, 01, 02, 03, 3.7, 3.8, and every time there's these new technologies. But the way that society reorganize ourselves in terms of our org charts, our budgets, our roles, our HR, all these things, that takes a lot longer. So I think a lot of this tension comes from that gap between the physical technology and the social technology. Just give it the second thing, and I want to actually lead on from what Haslina shared. When we think about bridging the gap of trust, we kind of have like 3 buckets of investments in bridging the gap of trust. And the analogy we use is that today, AI systems is like when cars were first invented, and between the invention of cars, it was a few decades before there was invention of seat belts. There was a few decades before the invention of like power locks, and even more time before the reality of driving licenses. So that's actually our 3 buckets of investment. We need to invest in safety, which is the seat belt. We need to invest in security against adversarial attacks, so people will not be worried about data leakage and hacking and all these things. And we need to invest in accreditation and education, so developers have the right skills, users have the right skills. I think these are things that we can help bridge that gap, that trust gap, and then further on like the ambition and reality gap.
Thank you. Now, I do have some questions for our panel, but actually some of them have been answered already, so I'd like to go directly to the questions from the audience. And one of them is intriguing me, that I think this links to Haslina's talk, but maybe we'll start with you, Haslina. AI solutions being implemented may cause management to have higher expectations on speed and amount of work done by staff on the ground, perhaps paradoxically causing staff more stress and more pressure. How do we prevent that? Or rather, I mean, prevent's a very kind of final word, but I think it's a legitimate concern.
Wow, that's a good one. Okay, it is true. I mean, since I hold the management role now, I do expect my staff to do more. Okay, I can't run about it, but I think there must be a balance, because AI is here and to stay, and we need technology to assist us, because we can't do all of the things that we need to do in a day. So how do you prevent that? I think it's really how you do time management and change management, how you have engaged your staff when you have deployed this AI. And you can't just deploy and leave it alone and expect it to run, right? You have to monitor in terms of staff morale, check in your staff and ask whether, are you very stressed? Am I giving you too much work to do? Mostly they say yes. But I think there's no good answer for this. And to be honest, with the AI, we will be expecting that our staff will have job transformation, workforce transformation, and job redesign. And it could be to something that they like, hopefully, but maybe something that they don't like, maybe some of it. So I think this is just the honest truth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Would anybody else like to?
Yeah, maybe I'll add on that. I really agree with that point. I think this stress is the kind of stress that will lead to workforce transformation. If they have no choice but to adopt AI, that in itself is a good pressure. But in itself, it is not sufficient as a boss. Because again, going back to the dyad of humanistic principles and AI, we need to make sure that even in the age of AI, our people are well taken care of. I think that cannot be overemphasized.
If you can just zoom in on the first sentence on AI solutions being implemented. I think I just want to comment on who's doing the implementing and what those teams look like. I work in an AI Center of Excellence, which is over 300 people, but actually less than 1/4 are actually data scientists and engineers. We actually have a large process re-engineering capability, as well as a large user experience, user research capability. So I think it's very important when you implement these systems to not just go live and then wash your hands off the system. We need to re-engineer the process, which I think something that's come across many times. It's not just adding software to current state. It's like re-engineering the whole process, and also being very mindful about what users, the people really being impacted are experiencing at a granular, individual, psychological, emotional level. So I think the AI solution team matters.
Yeah, so just to also add on, right? In fact, AI is also a tool, or enabler that actually help us to address the burnout issues in healthcare. I mean, the healthcare work in itself, right, is already very demanding for all our staff, Not to also mention that, some of the work, as we have more workload, right, you can't run away from the fact that you actually needed more manpower. But the reality is we can't bring in those manpower. Not that we don't have the money to spend, to hire, but we just don't have those resources to bring in, right? So again, that mindsets need to change. Why are we then bringing in tools that actually will help the staff to kind of navigate, right? To also then improve on their workflow processes, to reduce those mundane work for them, balancing the mental well-being, right, with what they also having to do at home, So I think the mindsets need to be changed through constant education to the staff.
Okay, so there's some questions here that follow on quite naturally, and it links to the the implications of the workforce of automating certain tasks. So if we take some key tasks, some tasks that have always been considered part of a job out of that job, give to AI, or how do the humans that are in the jobs gain sufficient experience and expertise to be senior in the process, to be the human checker? You know, should they be? They need to be more than the human checker in the loop. I mean, the fundamental question is we need to think about the implications on the workforce of AI. So I think, who would like to speak to that first?
Maybe I'll take that question first, because it's Selena, right? Okay, so basically when we implemented Selena, we didn't expect less from our junior graders. They still go through the rigid, very rigorous training framework that has been set up nationally. And even more so, because their role has changed to be able to detect more complex cases that Selena has actually taken as positive, and our graders need to be able to interpret these images well and determine the appropriate care action. So I don't see it as anything less, because actually now you get more experience rather than going through all the normal cases that you need to. Now you are very focused in terms of looking at those complex cases. So I think in terms of competency, skills, I wouldn't say that we expect anything less than what is required. Yeah.
Maybe I can add on to that. I think zooming out to a more macro lens, excuse me, we're here talking about assessments. How do we assess our juniors in the age of AI? Maybe go back 20 years ago when I was doing my PSLE, for example, we would test content. We would test whether you know what 1 + 1 is, 2 + 2 is. But nowadays, with AI can do that much faster than you can. Now we need to move into the realm of testing for knowledge. But not just knowledge, but wisdom. How do we test for wisdom? How do we come up with tests to say that, hey, this guy has that pearl of experience that AI doesn't have? How do we translate this experience into some assessment form that we can test? And that's something that medical education still has to grapple with. But yes, we don't expect anything less. If anything, we expect more. In the institutes that I do my further studies in, nowadays when they ask me to submit assessments, the first draft has to be AI generated. My second draft needs to be how I critique that AI draft. And so here we are not assessing for content delivery. We are not assessing for knowledge. We are assessing for discernment. And that's a part of wisdom.
Maybe I'll add just 2 points quickly again. The first one is we try to think through this idea of how do human skills change with generative AI. And the way we summarize it is that historically, I used to work, I'm coming from a data science background, and we had all these classification algorithms, based on deep learning or just classical machine learning and so on. And once you have the classification algorithm output, we used to take the output, then we would write a report. Right now, things have kind of flipped. We used to have discriminative ML and generative humans. Today, we have generative AI, and therefore we need discriminative humans. So I really think that the point of the way we train our people is to teach them is to invest effort in them to be good enough to be able to discriminate, because that's the nature of the work going forward. Also, just to give an example, for our own image processing projects, there are also new roles in the loop. So one new role is these systems are very complex, so you need orchestration, and therefore you need someone to manage the agent. So we are looking at agent management as a possible kind of new role. And the other one is that QA. Unfortunately, with the advent of pre-trained models, we have lost lots of visibility and provenance into the way data that has gone in, the way these models are trained. And in that respect, it's very hard to trust models that are just given to you as a black box. What we can do, there is no HSA for AI. And therefore, I think it falls onto organizations to rigorously QA and test models as they come in. I think QA of models and systems is also a growth area that we're looking at new roles here.
That actually leads us nicely to another question, which is about QA to implicitly. So if we're building effective AI, it has to fit the setting and the situation. So something that works in my home country of Scotland is not going to necessarily work in Singapore. The countries may start with the same letter, but they're very different. So how can we resist the temptation to, buy off the shelf, to copy and paste an AI model for one place to another place? And I think to some extent you've actually answered that, but I was just wondering if anybody else had anything to add. Okay, well, if we wanted to, related to that is the cost. So it's interesting that we've had one question that said AI solutions are cost effective for the hospital. But are they actually cost effective to the hospital? Because there are lots and lots of costs behind the scenes. It's not the AI itself, it's the cloud costs of this, of that, the next thing. Actually, I can't say that I know about all these backroom costs, but I'm sure there are lots there. So how do we make the decision? How do our leaders and how do people on the ground make the decision whether to spend money on AI or whether to spend money on the human workforce? Where's the balance? Or is that something that we're going to just have to get to over time?
Yeah, I think riding on to what I have shared just now, right? It's not about not having money to spend on more manpower. Yeah, the reality is we won't have enough. Yeah, especially even nursing, for example, right? Allied health professionals. So we really then have to look at alternative solutions that can help us to solve the manpower issue. On the cost side of things. Again, when it comes to new technology, the starting cost, a new one, right? The first that hit the market typically is going to cost a lot, yeah. But a lot of the technology solutions now are coming out really fast. So I give you an example. Like when we launched the LLM last year, yeah, we thought, Russell, first one, yeah, looking at clinical data sets and then, running the algorithm, the model to then come out with reports for the doctors. Then we realized that, hey, Synapse is building Tandem. And then our NUHS Alex campus was also then building another bot, right, which is the other LLM for administrator. So we pushed that out. But now what happened? We do have another alternative called PairChat. Okay? So PairChat, of course, built by GovTech and all, is going to be costing particularly nothing in a way, right, to us. But we have to start somewhere. If I look back now, if we had not started our journey last year, equipping our staff with the knowledge of using LLM, the prompt engineering, getting them appreciate what the tools, the capabilities are, it will not be so easy when we push out the PairChat now. Because PairChat has another ability where you actually can do personal assistant. You can go about building your own, right, bot and then share it among your fellow colleagues, whoever you need to share. So if we become very friendly cluster, I can build my personal assistant, I can share with you. Same thing I will share with NHG. So there will be this journey that we have to undertake where the starting cost will be high. But come some point, it will go down with the technology being more mature. I'm sure it's the same as in pharmaceutical. I mean, when we put in investment to do the new product, right, R&D costs and all, typically, within the first few years, yeah, a lot of efforts are put into the marketing, kind of campaigns, etc. So the cost of the product will be high. But soon come nearer to the patent, expiry and all, the cost will go down. And when generics come out, that's where it will even drive down further the cost. So it's actually quite a similar scenario.
Yeah, I really do agree on that. I think going back to industry, why would Grok, why would OpenAI, why would Claude, why would, excuse me, Meta all build generative AI products? It's not cost effective. Everyone spends trillions of dollars on this. Yes, they want to be the leader, but I think everybody does believe that there's good for humanity. And going back to the 3 clusters, like in NHG, when we build something for NHG education using AI, we share it with SHS. We get Prof. Latang Cheng from NUHS to share it with, to share as well. We share best practices, and that's where the friendship comes about. It's not about us being the one that is running forward. We all want the best of healthcare for all our citizens in Singapore. Yes, there is a cost to be the forerunner, but are you willing, is it cost effective to be the forerunner all the time? I think it's more effective to collaborate. If you can find a use case like energy education that can save 4.3 FTE on $12, as we presented, yes, please do it, because it's low risk. But don't keep it to yourself. Share it with SHS, which we did, and UHS as well. Yeah. Sorry, Jason.
I think, wherever any of us are in this AI journey, all experience is useful. Even if, eventually my app gets shut down or whatever, it's still useful because the worker is changed. The skills that we need to interact with it, the lessons you learn in the implementation, in the users itself, everything is useful. So I think first thing I'll say is that all experience is useful. The other thing is coming back to the idea that the word governance is very overloaded. We think of governance in different flavors. There is, I think, what you shared, investment governance. Where do you spend your money? That's investment governance. I think what we're talking about here is, what I mentioned before is like risk governance, the legal compliance, ethics, and so on. But there's a third element, which is technology governance, which means that, if I have like 5 of this app, please don't buy a number 6. Please do joint product planning. Please, do your roadmaps together. Why is the same feature appearing in 3 different places? Maybe I'm a little bit cynical, but I think collaboration, I think we need a bit more than collaboration. We need sometimes like technology governance structures. So, I'm an IT person. We think of it as an enterprise architecture who kind of have a placemat of all the different products in a certain capability. If you are in the same capability, and I know this is very hard in practice because of different organizations and so on, every AI product wants to scale, but every use case is super local. That's the tension always. And so, I get the tension. But nonetheless, I think going beyond collaboration to put in structures of technology governance saves you a lot of long-term pain if you can do it properly.
So I agree with your mention of the technology governance. Yeah, in fact, this is now the next phase that we have to go through, right? With now so many LLMs, on board, when do we kill some? Yeah, it's not just relating to LLMs. There could be other AI solutions that we have on board.
We're not going to have time to finish all the questions and get to lunch at roughly the correct time, but I did want to draw on one of the questions that's on the board at the minute, the analogy of the cars. So really showing my age here, I used to love the Terminator movies with Skynet taking over. So I always worry about AI turning into Skynet and, the world collapsing around us and Arnold Schwarzenegger needing to come to save us. So on a more serious note, on a day-to-day basis, when I was Vice Dean of Education at LKC, we did spend a lot of time thinking about the implications of AI, so the students using Gen AI for assessments and so on. And I think we were so bogged down in the operational side of life, we're always all bogged down in the operational side of life, that we didn't take the time and space to think about the longer-term consequences. I don't think you can anticipate all the longer-term consequences, but is there a framework, is there something that we could use to remind us to think ahead, to remind us not to just think about today? What strategies could we use? Jason?
I can have a stab at it. I think in terms of, firstly, I think you made a great point about Terminator, because the role of media shapes our imaginations on the future of AI. And sometimes, those pictures are not always helpful. I think you can have, I think someone in the previous session said he was a Catholic and showed a number of ways he thought about principles and commandments and so on. I think it's important to discipline our imagination a little bit when we think about the future of AI, because like, sometimes we see something on Netflix and then you see something on your email and you kind of like make an unconscious connection or two, and it's not so helpful. But if anyone would like to discuss existential risks of AI, actually, I lead the AI safety, so happy to chat about it more. I do think that one underappreciated capability is AI futures. It's something that we sometimes discuss because, even if, and I think healthcare knows this very well, even if there's a small probability of a large harm, you still need to think about that. But technology, I think we ourselves, in technology, we are not so good at this. The thing about long-term effects, massive negative effects of AI falls into the bucket of AI futures for us. And I think it's always useful, even though it's only a small probability, to have some dedicated effort thinking about this in a more explicit, intentional way.
Any quick points to add?
Yeah, maybe just to add on to Jason's comments, I think we need to evolve. As we evolve, I think a lot of the frameworks and legal references will all change to keep up with AI, I hope. But I think right now, we still don't really know. A lot of unknowns, although there's a lot of papers, but I think I'm keen to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, we can probably consider having video projects, looking at AI technology use in treatment.
I think learning from history is very important. We look at the diffusions of innovations curve. We see the diffusion of internet, calculator, phones, computers. They do take quite long to diffuse these innovations, but the diffusion of AI is actually very rapid. And I think human behavior doesn't change over time, or rather our patterns still default to our usual. And there's lots of lessons we can draw from history. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. So, although there are questions that we haven't answered, you know what our panelists look like. Please do approach them over lunchtime, coffee breaks, ask them any specific questions. Thank you to our 4 panelists. And I hope you all enjoy your lunch and the rest of today's exciting programme. Thank you, everyone.